Welcome everyone, how you guys doing tonight? I'm Nini FC, this is Blue Line CV, and tonight we're here to discuss a very important topic right now in the fan base, and that's in regards to our manager in Frank Lampard. Now, it seems at this point in time, there's a little bit of a divide between people that feel like Frank deserves time. Frank needs that time, he's showing the potential, let's believe in him. And of course, there's people on the other side who have their own personal perspective and takes, which everyone's free to do, who feel like maybe the inexperience that Lampard's showing could affect us long term and stop us reaching our goals. So tonight, of course, if we're going to have such a serious discussion, I need to have everyone on. Of course, you guys can see football therapy. Sorry, I just absolutely fumbled that. Sorry, you guys. But football therapy, Younes, son of Chelsea, Alex Goldberg, Joe Tweedie. I hope I haven't forgot anyone else. I think I probably have. And of course, Con as well from Twitter. So you guys, it's going to be a very balanced conversation today because that was the main focus. It's not about sides today. It's about just hearing everyone's perspective and just coming to the best conclusion together. So at this point now, I'm going to introduce you guys, all the guests, as you guys can see on screen. Let me just get rid of this together modes. Right now, Jan or Ma, I think you're on. So yeah, if you want to say hi to this chat really quick. If you can hear me, Ma.
I'm here.
Yeah,
How you doing, bro?
Let's say hi to the chat real quick.
How you doing, boys? It's good to see you. How you doing?
Nice. And everyone just take it from here because, Skype's just going to automatically have you on screen. So, son of Chelsea, how's things going, man? How are you feeling about this current situation? Is there like something wrong with my audio or something? Can you guys hear me okay?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear everyone, but I feel like people can't hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you okay.
Okay.
I can hear you.
I think a bunch of us were muted, I think.
That makes a lot more sense now. But yeah, there's so many people on screen. It's actually a waste of time to introduce everyone one by one. So to keep things focused and quick, I'm going to start straight with the discussion. Now, with our current form right now, starting with you, Nan, how do you feel about this situation? Do you feel hopeful, or do you feel like you're seeing some signs in Lampard that are a bit negative and you feel could jeopardize what we're trying to do here?
Cool. So did you say Jan or Dan?
I said Jan, but it was like a fusion of Jan and Dan because you know what? When you're trying to use OBS at the same time, it makes things very confusing.
I'll dig it. I'll give you a rundown of my feelings, right? I think basically a collective opinion, I'm going to assume, will be that results have not been good enough of late. Certainly, I think I think the performance against Arsenal was incredibly poor, and that was concerning. The result against Villa was poor, but perhaps the performance wasn't as concerning. I think a collective agreement would be that it's not good enough at the moment, but what concerns me and what has been concerning me is this sort of short memory. Like people have been judging Lampard like he's just this manager that's dropped in this month with these players and using this current sample size. He's been with us like a year and a few months. He was synonymous with scoring goals. This beginning of the season, people were putting Chelsea as, potentially fighting for the title. People were saying Silva and Zuma were the best centre-back partnership in the league. Mendy was great, dynamic fullbacks, top goal scorers in the Premier League. I believe we're still got the most individual goal scorers in the league, 13, which is really exciting if you look at Jose Mourinho relying on just Kane and Son. Really exciting and dynamic. All these players want to play for Frank. It was an exciting project. He's obviously a good spokesman for the club. He's obviously good at alluring players and inspiring players, but he's an inexperienced coach, and all that stuff I said before won't save him if it goes wrong. But because of all that aforementioned stuff I said of what Chelsea were and what we're being perceived as, in exceptional circumstances, and I do mean like the global pandemic, the new signings, the no time to prepare, the no preseason, the stuff that everyone's dealing with. But for Frank, with a new team, as a new coach, it's particularly difficult. And the club are clearly invested in him, giving him big financial investment. And I think there needs to be a decent amount of leniency before we think otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's a very nice opening statement. And anyone else want to give their opening statement? Son of Chelsea, let's hear your thoughts.
I sort of echo what Jan said there about sort of, it's quite jarring how we've got to this point in such a short space of time. I think that's where I'm coming from in this discussion, is how we've gone from literally in the space of a couple of weeks. And yes, I know at this time of the year, we play a lot of games, and that naturally, a lot of the mood can change very quickly. But I find it quite surprising how we've gone from, as Jan mentioned, feeling very optimistic about this team to feeling very depressed and concerned about it. When you look at the table, it's not that drastically awful. I feel we've gone through worse periods with other managers in the past. And I'm interested to hear people's opinions about Frank, because I think blowing up this thing and hitting the reset button now, I think could be a really stupid move, in my opinion.
Yeah, I believe so too. And, I'm curious to hear the response from Mar when it comes to what you just said, Daniel.
Well, when it comes to this, do you mean in terms of the whole team or specifically the player?
Well, just your own personal take. What do you feel like you wanted to respond to more?
For me, I really do. When I speak about Chelsea right now, I really do want to speak about the whole team, because there are individual things going on with individual players and obviously the manager. But just as a collective, I look at a team that are very inexperienced, coming together in a period of unprecedented times together. It's hard enough, I think, for every big team in Europe, as we've seen across European leagues, everyone's underperforming. But for a team like this, which you really can't find too much, I don't want to say there is experience in the team with Silva, but there is still a lack of. It's not your Drogbas, your Terrys, your Lampards. I mean, it is still a very raw team in terms of there's new signings that have come together that haven't been playing for a while, that haven't been playing together for a long time. The manager is very inexperienced. The coaching staff are quite inexperienced at this level. There's a lot of youngsters in that team, so there's actually very few inexperienced players. And I think this is a time, even with the fans on their back, even with fans coming at players and coming at the team, and this is obviously feels like quite a divisive time. Again, that's very new for a lot of these people in this team for the first time at Chelsea. So this is unprecedented times, unprecedented situations for them that they haven't ever had to deal with. So I'm not surprised that we're not showing, for me, we're not seeing our best light in terms of a Chelsea team on the pitch. That there's a lot mental that we don't speak about when we speak about the performances. Yeah, the players are playing very poorly. The manager, for me, hasn't been brilliant either with some of his decisions, with how he maybe potentially rotates the team and whatnot. But mentally, this must be extremely draining for this team. Off the pitch, on the pitch, draining as hell. I mean, you have a game where you're playing 48 hours after another. That in itself is difficult enough. To do that when you're going in poor form, I wasn't expecting a win against Villa, if I'm quite honest. Not because I don't believe in the team to win. They've won games before, but because I can kind of put myself in their position where I think they are mentally exhausted. And it's not great for content creators. It's not great for any of us probably if the Man City game gets cancelled. But in myself, I'm kind of hoping that game does. I think this team need a training camp for 2 weeks away from everyone to get not only tactically prepared for the next game, but mentally prepared. Yeah, I don't think they are.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I do think that, as you're trying to say too, it's like one of the many reasons as to why we're in this current form we are right now. But now at the same time, I felt like you as well, you've had your own type of critical takes where you've expected to see more and more. So it does kind of feel slightly like, not like a change of heart, but like maybe, like a different take basically.
I think, no, not even a different take. This is just with perspective after obviously sitting down after a few days. I think that Aston Villa game, it was 48 hours after the Arsenal one. So you're still feeling the Arsenal result, if I'm quite honest, when you speak about the Aston Villa game. I'm still concerned. I can still bring up all the points about, Pulisic at right wing and having Werner at left wing. I still, still struggle to see, why certain things are being done. Giroud not starting when we're pinning 34 crosses against Arsenal. None of these opinions have changed. But I want to shed light, especially now when I feel like people have heard my criticism. They've heard everybody's criticism. Everybody after the Arsenal game said the same review. They were angry. They were disappointed. They were hurt. They were questioning things. So there's no point me repeating that. But what I haven't said yet, which I feel like now reflecting, taking time, obviously, social media platform right now is going off. It's important to say mentally what, make that point. It's not even an excuse. Everybody's going through this period. Every team in the country is going through this period. But I think it's something that hasn't been said, and it's an important point that's not been mentioned yet. I haven't seen mentioned yet.
Sorry, I don't mean to butt in, but can I make a point to what Matty said? If that's what I mean.
Yeah, of course, man.
So he said he wants the Man City game to be cancelled, right? But no other manager in Chelsea history has had this sort of situation. Or like we've never said, under Sarri, under Conte, we want an extra break to prepare for that. I'm sorry, he's been with the majority of this group of players for over a year now. I don't understand. The Everton game was the biggest problem, in my opinion, and it's not spoken about enough because they played 4 centre-backs and our main attack was crossing it into the box. Like, what other manager would do that against 4 centre-backs and you're backing yourself to get it into the box when Chilwell is a bit inconsistent with deliveries, so you're going to have to rely on Reece James, but against Everton was mostly going down the left and we're not even utilising Reece James. So that doesn't make sense to me, and that's where the biggest doubt from me came in, was the Everton. And then we move on to Wolves, and it's the same thing. And you're like, okay, but surely Lampard, you're going to fix it up. You're going to change something because we're too predictable. Against Arsenal, I'm leaving out the West Ham game because I think all of us would, agree that that really wasn't a 3-0 win, and I don't know, we didn't look great in that game, so I'm just going to leave that out. But against Arsenal, he does the same thing, and this is the worst Arsenal side I've witnessed in my entire life. Fans have a right to be outraged by that. Absolutely outraged.
All right, Con. You did start off your answer saying that Lampard's been with this team for a year or more. I mean, that is horribly wrong when you look at all the players that are supposed to be regulars in this side. He's been with most of them for less than a half a year.
I think that's a fair point.
Alex,
yeah, Alex, do you want to repeat? Yeah. Alex, is your audio okay?
No, I said what I needed to say.
You said it. Okay, you're waiting for him to respond
my
now.
My audio's
okay.
fine. What I'm saying is I agree with the simplicity of attack. Trust me, I agree with that, and that is very frustrating. I've highlighted the goal that we scored against Villa, the one goal, as a goal that I need to see more of. I need to see, fine, if you want to cross it in and score goals, great. But have it start through the middle. Have a little bit more than just cross with Reece from 35 yards out. So I agree with everybody if they're saying Frank doesn't really look like he's doing much tactically. Totally agree. But getting back to what Jan said and a few of the first answers about how everything is inexperienced, everything. So this team, Joe Tweedie's made this point before on my podcast, this team, how many winners, like actual factual winners who have won championships, league titles, how many do we have in the squad? Not many. We have a lot of young players in the squad. We have a lot of new players in the squad. We have Frank Lampard, who's a new manager. And obviously this COVID thing is brand new. So those aren't really excuses. They're just facts. So once again, Lampard's got to do better. The players got to do better. But to definitely agree with what Jan was saying of everything is so brand new here, where I actually think that if you take last year's team, you give Frank last year's team for this start of the season, might be a little better points-wise because of that continuity. Some bad teams who didn't change much over the summer, well, they look a lot more steady and stable. Now, trust me, I'd much rather have the players that we have, but it's not completely surprising to me that it's so inconsistent, and especially when a player or two gets injured, completely everything falls apart. But to really harp on what Khan said, to critique Frank saying that he's had these players for a year or more, that's just wrong.
Yeah, I like to just like even say something too, because, you know, I kind of feel like that's a little bit wrong as well, in the sense that this stuff needs a lot of time and care to curate, you know, like we're not going to become a perfect team overnight. Like this isn't like a linear type of thing where every day, every week, you know, you're adding progression and getting better and better. But I think I really want to ask Joe what your thoughts are, because, you know, when I analyze the discussion, the debate from both sides, for me, a conclusion that I come to is that there seems to be like this debate between, you know, the responsibility that Lampard takes for his tactics and the players on the field maybe not executing them. So how do you feel about that?
I think the link between the players and the tactics to me is one of the interesting things, and probably one of the things that I've spent maybe the most amount of time thinking about over the past couple of weeks. And I know for a fact that certainly from the summer, you go back to Lampard's kind of training practices and sort of the the end goal of this team is to be like a high intensity, high press, sort of super kind of rock and roll style football like Jurgen Klopp. To play that kind of football over the sort of, let's say like a quote unquote normal season is difficult. It's a reason why we saw Klopp transition away from the sort of pressing style and pressing triggers that he used at Liverpool, sort of when he first joined, to kind of like a slightly more rational take, kind of picking your moments, sort of being a little bit more organised, a little less frenetic. But I think what Lampard is doing, it's probably just naivety in terms of his sort of managerial career. He's still very, very young into it. He's still trying to play that high press. You factor in the COVID, you factor in the condensed time schedule. My biggest theory is I think the recovery, the load management of the players, the intensity of training that he wants, all these sorts of things that we've heard from the Athletic and various journalists and sort of people connected to the club. I think that certainly when you're asking the players to do some quite complex things tactically, someone like Mason Mount is asked to defend, to cover fullbacks. We're one of the only teams that bomb forward with both fullbacks, get into the area, score goals, create, etc. There's a lot of instructions to do on someone, as well as being like the main guy who presses. I think he's like 5th in the league for pressures this season as well. These sort of instructions that I think he's giving the players early part of the season, when we're fresh, when it's a little bit easier to execute, you can see the sort of style of football they were trying to play. Go back to the Burnley game, go back to some of the games you've seen earlier in the season. What I think he hasn't done, and probably my biggest critique of him as a coach, is I don't think he has the foresight at the moment to really adjust the schedule of the players. So we've come into this period, we're playing every sort of other day, etc., etc. It is impossible, even for players like Mount and Kante, to keep that level of work rate up, that intensity, that level of press, and then still execute the tactical instructions. Okay. So for me, what I wanted to see was just like him simplify things and refine things a little bit. But I think we're certainly come to the point now, certainly from a Chelsea board perspective, if you remove the Frank Lampard legacy part out of the equation, this feels like a stick and twist moment for them. And that's what I'm a little bit concerned with. I think he's keeping sort of things together. I think he needs the City game possibly to be postponed to give the players that rest period. But that could be a very critical game. But I think that there's, for me, certainly a link between the tactics and the execution of players. You can't advocate for people like Timo Werner missing very, very guilty chances. You can't advocate for some of the misses we've had. We're still creating some good chances in games, which I would expect better players or more consistent finishers to score. Pulisic at Villa, for example, for me, possibly should have scored that chance that he had. Okay. When your luck's not there, it's not there.
Yeah, and I think just, the perfect segue is to now lead on to Younes, because Younes, man, and it's time for you to say your piece now. Just to follow on from what Joe was saying, what is your thoughts and opinions behind Lampard's? Do you feel like maybe, it is his coaching? He is to blame for most of this because he isn't managing things as perfectly right now. Younes, I think you're muted by accident. Yeah.
On Skype, mate.
Here we are.
Hey, let's go.
I thought I unmuted. No, I second what Joe has said there. I do think, and my concern isn't in the fact that I don't believe Lampard can fix it, because I think with enough time, we know he's learning, he's inexperienced, and as the circumstances show, it's not easy. I get that. But we know what Roman is like. Let's not pretend like we met him yesterday. We know that if results are not coming in, it will get to a point where he will consider. And if it doesn't improve, he will bite the bullet, and that's my concern. My concern is I want Lampard to do what is necessary in order to rectify the situation. Now, Joe has come out with quite a few valid points there. Specifically in regards to how much intensity there is in the side when in talking about training and the circumstances that we have with COVID and all of that madness going on. But at the same time, that one way of playing that we seem to rely on, where I've been advocating since we lost to Wolves mainly. I know we lost to Everton. I kind of thought, okay, hopefully this is just a blip. We saw the same repeated mistakes against Wolves, and that's where I started to get a little bit, like, okay, what's going on? We've seen results since then not go our way, and the Arsenal game was just a catastrophe. But being able to just focus on one way of playing and that reliance on our wings and our fullbacks going so far forward, and at the same time, not even having players to come in and cut in or utilize any creativity in the middle, which gives us another outlet, which is crazy because the Mason Mount pass to Giroud in the build-up for the Aston Villa goal had that. So I'm like, why are we not doing this more? This is what I want to see, and I want to see more. Lampard being a bit more vocal, taking maybe a little bit more responsibility as well, and hopefully he can get it changed, because he needs to. If he doesn't change it, results keep going the way they are. I believe Roman will not hesitate, and that's my concern.
Yeah, but I'm going to leave this question out for anyone to take. But you're Frank Lampard. You've got a young team where, when you take this job, a lot of your mentality has to be for the future. You have to be thinking about what's going to be best for this club in the long term. And, sometimes you do have to develop a team to get used to playing, for me, a high level of football, because it's not like clubs like Burnley are going to attempt to play this style of football. I understand what Joe's saying. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with it, especially if you're a young player, where that balance between expressing yourself, following the team duties, etc., plus, such a very busy month. I can see how poor performances can become a thing, but is this not sometimes a means to the end? Do we not have to go through this process to, get to the end? For example, Ranieri, when he was coaching players like Terry, Lampard and co, when they were like 21, 22, these guys weren't the same caliber of player that they became when Mourinho took over. But then Mourinho profited from all the hard work, all the mistakes that those guys were allowed to make under Ranieri, because he had that long-term goal of, I know what player you are going to become. So could this be the same thing that Lampard is trying to instill into the team right now? Like I said, any man can take that question.
I'm happy to jump in if no one's going. Yeah, absolutely, Nini. I think it's really, really important here, because you have to marry what you said, this sort of teething process, right, with the inexperience of Frank Lampard. And also, yes, Roman, to pick up on what Younes said, Roman will pull the trigger if he has to. And I think almost, not that the Lampard in and out debate becomes redundant, you just need to know that Chelsea are the kind of club, regardless to any new vision, that will sack him if they're screwed, right? So that will happen one way or another. But at the same time, there has to be a consideration. Now, football is changing a little bit. Chelsea's model of hiring and sacking is no longer as effective as it used to be. That's just due to the current footballing climate. You look at Jurgen Klopp. Yes, it's not fair to compare Lampard to Jurgen Klopp, who was given years of obscurity at Liverpool, loads of scoring, poor defence. That's very similar parallels to Chelsea. Bearing in mind, Lampard's been here 5 minutes in the grand scheme of things in terms of dynasty. Lampard, I know people don't want to hear it. Lampard won Manager of the Month. Frank Lampard was nominated for Manager of the Year in his first season at Chelsea. I'm a huge Lampard fanboy, but I still have to be balanced. And I looked at that and I thought that was a little bit of a push, but I still wasn't very impressed with what he did. But this was always going to happen. You're always going to get a stink, because he's not superb prime Guardiola straight away. Of course he isn't. And yes, he's got to deal with a load of mental stuff going on. There's a teething period. It's very difficult. He's got a couple of German superstars who, he'll be inclined to play by the club are telling him to play. Like you said, I think, Nini, had he played the team from, I can't remember who said it. It might have been you, Nini. If he played the exact same 11 from last season, we might be doing a little bit better right now, because that's down to continuity. But he's got pressure to implement these new signings. And yes, everyone will agree here. Everyone in this call will agree he's made mistakes. And I never expected Frank Lampard to be flawless. And I knew he was going to grow on the job. But because of the kind of character he is, he's a very intelligent man. He's very intelligent when it comes to football, and he's a good spokesman. That's why I'm a fanboy, apart from being a Lampard fanboy. Is he going to be an amazing manager? I don't know. The jury's out. But I've seen enough and to say, yes, I think he could be. And I've seen enough to do with mentality, reflecting as him as a player. I'm not one of these people that say, oh, he's a great player, so he's going to be a great manager. I'm talking about as a man, as a professional, as a man in work, his attitude towards, with application. And also, I wanted to get this in because we are in I've said this on my channel a couple of times, we are in a very, very, very unique situation. We have got a football manager at our club who would genuinely put the club before his own managerial career. Now, Chelsea have never had that. I mean, you could say maybe like, I don't know, Di Matteo or something, or but recently with our recent success, we've had mercenary managers that it's all about them. They protect themselves before Chelsea, and I include Mourinho, I include Antonio Conte, I include Sarri. They were all like, "Oh, this is a good job for me right now." Frank's had his career. He's got loads of money. I know some people that look after his property. He's got no problem for money, right? He's got he's a baller, right?
Yeah.
But he wants to manage Chelsea and do everything in his power to make Chelsea the best team in Europe. And that will never happen again for Chelsea. It will always be a new manager that comes in that protects himself first,
of course,
before the success of the club.
Yeah.
Can I just make a point, Jan, if that's all right? So you said like that's what he wants. I want to be a millionaire, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen. It's not something that I can personally like achieve if I don't have the facilities for it. So
I think you can,
Con. Lampard.
I think you can do that, Con.
Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, Con, man. Yeah, I know you've got more observations and thoughts. Yeah, continue on, man.
No, it's really hard for me to say this stuff because I grew up watching Lampard. Like, I'm from that era where we got to witness Terry and Lampard all our lives, right? So it's really hard for me to speak out, but then again, we have to put the club first and remove sentiment from the equation.
But at what point though does sentiment have to be removed? Because I do understand
your club's going through something like this, Nini.
Yeah,
Can I just jump in? Can I just jump in?
Of course, everyone jump into what they want.
Sorry, I just think that the talk of and I'm going to use the word right now because I think someone will use it eventually in this call, crisis, right? I feel we need to bin the word crisis, at least for now, because Chelsea are not in a crisis. We were in a crisis maybe in 15-16 when it looked like for a small period of time, a bit like Arsenal are currently, could have been relegated, right? We're going through a difficult period of results, right? As I said in my first point, a few weeks back, we were talking about this team potentially challenging for a Premier League title. What I'm seeing now is what I've seen for the last 2 or 3 years. And I think this very much jumps into Jan's point about the hire and fire, like the short term over the long term, over and over and over and again. I think people still, and I see this with comments, and I've seen this with people arguing about Lampard, where it's like they're judging Chelsea like 2015 Chelsea rather than, and sort of completely blocking out the Conte and Sarri years. Like Chelsea for the last 2 or 3 seasons, leading on to this season as well, are fighting for Champions League qualification. Like that's what we've been doing. We haven't won a Premier League title since 2017, and we've had 2 coaches since we won the league last with Conte, and we've got further and further away from winning a domestic title. So the idea that sort of philosophy before of short term over long term is what's going to work. So this is the thing, right? If you want Lampard to be sacked tomorrow, you need to give me someone who's going to come in, and B, also in a year's time, if that manager, let's say Tuchel, is struggling in the same way Conte, Sarri and Lampard has, what's the answer then? I think that I made this point when Sarri was here, that I think I was on Younes' channel, we had a big discussion about this a few years ago. And I said that the mentality of Chelsea, I think, has to change, or at least the culture of constantly prioritizing short over long term, win now, ask questions later, because we keep on doing this and we get further and further away from Liverpool. Now, I agree with Jan, and I'll express the sentiment despite my belief in Frank Lampard, that I don't know if he's going to win us a Premier League title. I wish I had a TARDIS and I could get in there and go in a year's time and find out if Frank Lampard could do that for us, right? But I just think that I just get sick and tired of the constant sort of let's just smash the reset button, because we've had a few difficult weeks, and then we've just backed Lampard heavily last summer, the most heaviest transfer window, the biggest transfer window this club has had probably since Roman's earliest transfer windows, if you think about it. And then I asked questions of the board, and it's the same questions I asked of the board when we signed Sarri. If you aren't going to back Sarri, if you aren't going to back a manager that needs a longer period of time, then why are you backing him in the first place? Why are you bringing him into the club? And the same questions won't go to Lampard, they'll go to the board. Why did you risk a manager with inexperience who you knew only had 1 year at Derby? If you're going to back him. Give him the time to succeed. Now, Lampard may fail completely, right? And then we have to rethink. But I just this constant like 0 to 10 we've had over the recent weeks, like just because of some bad results. The results I've seen in recent years under Conte and Sarri, and Lampard got us Champions League football with no Eden Hazard, a transfer ban, being an inexperienced manager, and young players in the first team over Antonio Conte, who had a title-winning team with him, and also Eden Hazard in his team. You know, the year after we won the Premier League title with Antonio Conte, he failed to get us Champions League football, but Frank Lampard achieved that. That's a massive point that I think people don't understand, right? Conte, like we're talking about recent managers, that was like the worst year I've experienced recently, because in terms of what Conte had that season, you can blame Morata, you can blame Bakayoko all you want, right? But the mismanagement that year for me was massive, right? And I think me and Nini, sorry to keep on going on about this, but I just think that if the answer is constantly just sack the manager, I think in 5 years' time, we're going to be sat here again, whoever it is, asking how can Chelsea win a Premier League title again? So that's the question I want to pose to people, because it's to me, all I see is us getting further and further away from the top of the Premier League.
Dan, I want to just agree. That's really well said by Dan. And if you do that with Frank Lampard, you sack him anytime soon, Dan is right. You're going to be doing that with every manager from here on out, unless they're winning you a Premier League title or a Champions League title every season. You are literally setting up a pattern where if you couldn't last with Frank for even a year and a half, a season and a half, if you can't do that after backing him that much, like Dan just said, well, then you're not going to last with anybody. Thomas Tuchel would have to come in right away and pretty much show you that he can compete with Liverpool and City as good as they are right now. And I know Liverpool, obviously, this season are way ahead of City. But the whole point is you set a precedent where Chelsea have had their finger on the trigger for years and years and years. So as annoyed as I get at Twitter when I see after Chelsea lose or draw, I see all the debates of Lampard in or Lampard out. We also have to remember that it's not all our faults or all the fans' faults for entertaining that. Chelsea have made us entertain. Oh, results bad? Should we talk about manager in or manager out? They're the ones who have then sacked the manager. So it's not like we're just creating this conversation out of the blue. So I do want to kind of defend some people who are bringing it up a lot. Me personally, I'm kind of over bringing it up a lot, but I definitely understand that Chelsea have set that precedent. But for me personally on Lampard I'll take sentiment away, like Khan asked, because I think a lot of people who are Lampard out are just saying, take sentiment away, take sentiment away. A lot of us are taking sentiment away. We're not thinking of Lampard wearing the number 8 jersey, scoring 40-yard screamers. We're not. But obviously, he does mean more to the club, and he also understands the club a little bit more. So the reason why I can't say that it would be a good decision right now to get rid of Lampard is the facts are the facts. He hasn't had the consistency in his squad that any manager would really ask for. And he apparently, so I'm not defending him really right now, but he apparently has visions for Hakeem Ziyech, for Timo Werner, for Kai Havertz, for Thiago Silva, for Ben Chilwell. Mendy, I always kind of put with Petr Cech as well. A keeper's a keeper. But he has visions for all these guys that he was really, really a part of bringing to the club. And he has visions for the youngsters that he has brought through the club. So obviously, if Frank was sacked tomorrow, people can't say that he didn't leave this club in a better place, because he absolutely did. He brought in incredible players that Thomas Tuchel or whoever takes over is going to say, wow, thank you, Frank. Look what I have at my disposal. And look at the youngsters you brought through. So he has done so much for this club already, Frank Lampard. Yes, this is not the free hit season. That season is over. Younes already said it. Roman will absolutely sack anybody. But he needs a bit more time to actually try and put forth this vision that involves so many players. If I were to ask anybody on the street, hey, list me your top 3 favorite Chelsea players right now, there's a pretty damn good chance Frank Lampard's a reason that they're at the club. Even someone like Kovacic, who obviously came before, well, Kovacic was made permanent pretty much when Lampard takes over. So it's far and wide. You can really just count on one hand the players that could be your favorite players that Lampard had nothing to do with. So it would really be a shame, right? Tuchel takes over. Let's say he could be great, but let's say Tuchel takes over and in 6 months' time, we say, once again, we're in a crisis, even though I agree with Dan, we use that word too much. Let's say we get right back to that point. I guarantee you, even some Lampard out people, they might want not to admit it, but even some Lampard out people will think, man, maybe we should have just saw out what Frank wanted to do a little bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree. I feel like, for me, like when I understand things, I need to base things on a reference. I feel like sometimes with like discussions like this, they can just like become a bit too metaphorical where, you know, we're talking about this sense of perfection where it's like sometimes it's even that, you know, realistic. I look at Lampard, I look at the good things he's brought, and I see the quick improvements to things like our set-piece defending, to things like how we defend as a team, as a unit, the amount of goals we're conceding, the amount of dangerous shots that we're not letting in on goal either, and, you know, some of the fantastic one-touch play that was one of the main reasons as to why we started that great run of form. It was no surprise that that form continues to accelerate even more when Ziyech was back in this team too. And for me, I feel like the discussion is just a bit overly negative. I'm just with Daniel on this one. I do feel like we're not at a point right now where we can really decide whether Lampard's in a crisis, if the club's in a crisis at this point in time. I think all of us have spoken about the pros and cons about this current situation. We've spoken about things that have worked against Frank and things that maybe he could have done a little bit better in. But, you know, seeing how you were playing earlier this season, that one-touch play, and then in this current period and form, that's just completely evaporated. And yeah, we see that quality at times, as we saw for the first goal against Aston Villa. But for me, I'm on the field, I'm seeing players like Jorginho, and, you know, I'm looking at how he's constantly making a back three. And of course, when this guy's deeper in the back three, we got no one ahead of the opposition midfield to receive the ball turn and help us play quick. You know, this is what I mean. We're a team that's trying to play fast, quick, intense, you know, counter-pressing style of football, and you can't waste possession for no reason. So I bring up Jorginho because, for me, times like that is when Lampard's forced to use a player that I don't think personally he would want to use if he didn't have to. I think if Gilmour was ready, I think Lampard would prefer to use him over Jorginho, but I think when he's forced to use certain players, then the whole team has to adapt, because imagine leaving Jorginho in a DM position by himself, where, you know, he'll get caught on the half turn. He's got no recovery pace. His tackling, as we saw versus Villa recently with Grealish, isn't that great too. That would put us at a massive disadvantage that we were seeing from last season. So, you know, I'm making this point to just like, you know, bring up some of the reasons behind why I feel Frank gets forced to do certain things. And, you know, end of the day, when you have a young team that has so many, you know, injury-prone players. Our form start at the minute, Hudson, Pulisic and Ziyech are all out the team. Can most teams cope with having that many attacking players out? I don't personally think so in the league. And that's just one of the small examples behind why I feel like I've seen a lot in the good that Lampard's done. And just to finish my point, I feel like too often when it comes to analysing situations, we only want to focus on the negatives all the time, as if like that gives you the true answer behind what's really happening, disregarding all the positives we saw. But for me, you got to like mix them both together, pros and cons, weigh them out and find the conclusion. And I feel like if people did that, I feel people remember a lot of the good stuff that's been done under Lampard this season, in my personal opinion. So I'll let anyone take that.
Nini, can I just make a
man.
counterpoint to what you said about Jorginho? He didn't have to start against Villa because Kovacic only played a half against Arsenal. Gilmour was supposed to be ready. So you can play Kante at the base, throw Kovacic in, or Kai Havertz, your person you paid 75 mil for, who came on and looked fantastic, by the way.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to blame
but
that
I feel
Jorginho.
that's like a hindsight argument, because of course
Yeah.
we've seen that
but
Kai
you
hasn't been
just said that
great,
he's
so he had to
forced
be out the
use
team
Kai.
for a bit.
He wasn't forced to use Jorginho in that situation.
But I don't know. I feel like, you know, a manager, you look at the months, your month ahead, you're planning in advance. You know, this isn't happening on the day. You know, it was clear there was a plan. There was going to be like a backup team versus Villa, and the main team that we risked using Ben and Reece versus Arsenal. So, you know, during times like this, when everyone's tired, you have to turn to the squads. And I feel if Lampard felt he had to, I don't think he's doing it for no reason. And I feel like sometimes, like, there's this, like, you know, we keep forgetting that. Okay, just give me a second. Like, when I see the situation sometimes, I feel like some of the critique that Lampard gets isn't always as fair, because it's not really, like, seen in the right perspective. Like, for example, when we watch our films and TV series, yeah, we can watch a film and TV series, enjoy it for the spectacle, enjoy it for the entertainment, but at the same time, we know that there's a lot of technical work happening behind the scenes to make this show happen, where we can then, you know, discuss the moments on Twitter, whatever crazy stuff that happened with our friends, blah, blah, blah. And I feel like with football, sometimes it's kind of like the same equivalence. It's like, you know, everyone focuses on the storylines, the moments, the hype, the spectacle, forgetting that there's a lot of like technical stuff behind the scenes that, you know, is really important. And sometimes you're constantly managing resources. I think that's what managing really is, to be honest. So I do feel like, things can be a bit unfair towards Lampard, because then this like unrealistic expectation is what he's constantly getting measured against.
Can I just take a second here? And I'll actually be keen to, if Joe's still knocking about, I want to get his actual thoughts on the managerial capacity of Frank Lampard. But I do have empathy with what Con's saying. I know his stance, and he's right to have it. I see what you're saying, Nini. Basically, I think, in hindsight, of course, he probably saw he screwed up, right? And I'm a massive Billy Gilmore fan. I'm with Con. I'd love to see him in the team, definitely over Jorginho. But I'd understand what you say. Oh, he's a senior player, Jorginho. He's played a lot. I sort of have to trust him. I'm in a moment where I need trusted players, and it didn't work. And it didn't work because, Lampard got some stuff wrong recently. He just has. He's got it wrong.
Is it really wrong, though? Like, for example, the Arsenal game, if you put out a poll before the game started, like, okay, if you could start Reece and Ben over Emerson and Aspie, I guarantee the polls.
Everyone wanted that lineup. No, 100% Nini. When that lineup came out, everyone was gassed. Yeah. But it's the thing is, it is the coach's responsibility to appropriate the coaching staff's responsibility
but I'm saying that as a coach, though, if you're playing against Arsenal, I can't see many managers not risking using their best players. I mean, let's not pretend that players don't play through injury.
Okay, so my point is a little bit more general, that Lampard hasn't been he's been flawed. For me, he's made mistakes of late, and I'm very much I subscribe to the fact how he needs development. But I was expecting this to come. I didn't think Frank Lampard was randomly just going to fly across to win the title with no hiccups on the way. I was waiting for this. I'm winter is coming in the back of my head at some point from this guy who I believe in generally, but that's why, someone that a lot of people in the chat, I do want to ask Joe, if you don't mind me pulling the question to him, Nini, if he's still knocking about, because I know he speaks to people regarding coaching and stuff. And generally, I remember him being a fan of Frank Lampard, but I'd like to hear him express his current stance on him going forwards. If you're there, Joe.
Yeah, sure. I think probably, and I think I'll caveat this somewhat with, I think your stance on this will kind of depend a little bit on your perception of Frank Lampard. So if we look at the kind of season as a whole, I think my main concern has been that when your team isn't at complete capacity to play at 100%, so we're talking fitness, we're talking recovery, we're talking ability to press a million miles an hour for 90 minutes. I think when that sort of reality isn't there and you can't actually play in that style, you have to have some sort of form of let's say, some sort of tactical tweaks or a kind of a different plan or a different way of attacking opponents. And I think that has been my concern probably this season after that sort of 16-game run we went on. The running stats after the Leeds game were sort of a very big talking point, the amount that the team ran. You have to find ways where you can win games where you're not that intense. And I think back to a lot of title winning sides, not just Chelsea, but over the course of Liverpool, City, etc. You have to be able to win games in different ways. And I think at the moment, the criticism or the critique or the concern that I would have with Lampard is that this style, which is very exciting to watch, that 16-game run, I think we played very well during there. I think there is a little bit lacking in, let's say, patterns of play or build-up or whatever kind of terminology you want to use, that when you are tired as an athlete, it's almost like muscle memory. You've done so many repetitions in training, you've had so many circuits, you've done so many kind of these types of moves, that if you're at 75%, you can actually fall back on those patterns of play, and then you can still build up, you can still attack in the final third, you can still look somewhat fluid. But going back to the point I was making about the caveat, I'm not sure really this season that the time has been there to coach those patterns of play. So that's where I sit on the fence a bit with Lampard, because I would expect a more experienced coach to have that in their locker, because they're more experienced and they have that kind of, you could say, that arsenal behind them to pull from in terms of coaching. With Lampard, I think he's done well to establish his kind of first choice of play, heavy metal, Jurgen Klopp kind of style of football. But now we're seeing the team tired, we're seeing them not being able to play at that capacity, people playing through injuries, etc. That's now where your secondary coaching comes in, your patterns of play, your ability to kill a game, to take the sting out of game by keeping possession, by playing at a slower pace. So I think very much what I'm looking for Lampard going forward is, I don't know if it's an adjustment, I think it's maybe sort of a realisation, and we've seen it with better, more experienced coaches. I keep using Klopp because I think there are similarities in the end style with which they're trying to sort of get to. Klopp, maybe second season, realised that he couldn't play this insane kind of style of pressing. I think Leeds will kind of probably come to a similar point this season under Bielsa, where they'll be very tired in the second half of the season. I think once Lampard gets that balance, and maybe a little bit more of an understanding that, we can have some sort of set patterns, we can have some set build-up, set patterns of play, structure within the side. There can be moments where we can rely on these sort of automatisms.
Yeah.
That for me, that's kind of where I'm sort of sitting, is that people may think that we should have a secondary style. That's absolutely fine. I would debate whether the time has really been there to put that in for coaching. If you're trying to focus on recovery, you're trying to focus on getting the players fit, you don't really have the time to put them through a 2-hour session where you're literally coaching how to progress the ball from a centre-back midfielder to a winger. But maybe that's something that if we would have had that, then I think some of these results we've seen that we've looked very stagnant, where we've gone to that sort of U shape of just trying to get it out wide because it's a simple pass. And putting crosses into the box.
100%.
But one last thing, I think just on this whole crossing topic, I don't think that this really is something by design that Lampard does. And the reason that I say that is because when you're tired as a team and you're playing against opponents, most teams will want to dominate the middle of the pitch. And if you're not completely a racist, it's very unlikely that you're going to want to play those risky passes. You're going to want to try and punch the ball into Giroud. You're going to try and, as Mount or Havertz or whoever, they want to sort of get in behind the DN. They want to get into those pockets of space. You're going to take the easy pass. You're going to take the easy out ball. Teams will concede the width of the pitch. They'll know most cases they can defend crosses. They'll back their centre backs to defend crosses. So, looking at sort of how we've played, for me, it looks just a little bit as a lack of confidence in the team, and I just think that there's tiredness, and it's led to these kind of easy out balls, people taking the easy option because maybe they don't want to do the running, maybe they can't do the running that they've done previously. So it's a bit of a combination, but the secondary tactical stuff, Nini, is probably that's what I wanted to see. I don't know if he's really had the time.
Yeah, but this is what I wanted to actually
kind of the tiredness and what we're seeing so far.
Yeah, but this is what I wanted to just ask you, because obviously, I completely understand and I agree with what you were saying, but this is what my argument basically is. When did the players take responsibility? Because of course, football, when you're tired, there's these automatisms. I said that so wrong, you guys. Apologies. They're so important because again, it gets you through periods like this. For example, I remember quotes from United players playing under Paul Scholes. They just make certain runs and Scholes wouldn't even have to look in that area. He would just play a pass there because that's how they've been coached. That's how well drilled they've been. And because we've seen glimpses of this, and this is what I mean. I've seen the glimpses before Kai got COVID, when Ziyech was fully fit. When we had a fully fit squad, which is like one of the few times Lampard's ever had that, we saw that, okay, we can play football at that next level. You were saying things about how we don't have that plan B, but in the games when we were on point, we normally won the game by the first half, and second half we could just play counter-attack and then pick teams off even more. So, when I look at us at our best, that's obviously the target. That's obviously what we're trying to achieve. But, when you've got injuries to key players at the wrong time, and you've got, I think fodder from last season too. I'm happy to say that because I thought last season Lampard found ingenious ways to even get us in the top four with that squad. And, when you've got guys like Cover and George who, they're the notorious moving the ball slowly. That's going to affect all the other players in the field. So it's no surprise to me why, we became so predictable. But for me, it was never a question about Lampard's tactics being bad, because this whole thing about there's this mystical magical super tactic that it will be undefeated against all tactics. It doesn't work like that. Football's one of them games where most times
it's not Football Manager.
Exactly. Most times in football, you'll play against a team. It's very cagey because both teams are cancelling each other out, and then all those moments where people are talking about wanting the plan B. For me, that actually comes from individual player expression. When you see how many tight games have United won just because Rashford can blast it out from 20 yards, because he can skip past two players and take responsibility when he has to. Because, system-wise, United's is not, if people want to say, what's their system? I get the argument. But with us, we've shown so many positive glimpses that it's about the execution.
I want to agree with that and just piggyback off of that and just say, there's something to be said for the fact that, yes, this team on paper has a lot of guys. If Kai and Timo are themselves, Ziyech is back, Pulisic's himself. This team has a lot of guys that theoretically, game to game, could be the game winner, the match winner, the person to put his team on his back and carry them. But in this side, there's actually no established player yet that's been doing it in this side. So I don't want to bring up Eden Hazard's name to make us all cry and all miss him again and everything. And I also don't want to make people viewing this believe that there's only one way to win and you have to have Eden Hazard to win. But look at all the top teams. Look at City. Yes, they share it around, and game to game they can have different match winners, but they always have De Bruyne's fingerprints over it, or they always have at least one of their secondary people's fingerprints all over it. Liverpool, they know that usually, attacking-wise, Mane or Salah or both are going to be players that when the game gets tough, they'll go out and win it. And this is the thing that Chelsea are missing right now. So you said sometimes a plan B actually just needs to be players saying, you know what, I'm going to take over this game. And something that Eden Hazard did just so brilliantly was, he was on the left wing, and technically he'd be out there a lot, and that's not the center of the pitch, but the ball was magnetic to him when it needed to be more often than not. And even look at Villa, who obviously is a worse team, but Grealish at left wing dominates the game when the game needs to be dominated. And right now, Chelsea have those players. They no doubt have those players. We have a lot of them. We're spoiled, but we haven't established yet any consistent player when the rough gets going, right?
Yeah.
There's nobody who actually has experience in this side taking over games. Pulisic did it a little bit in the restart, but that isn't something that's been institutionalized in this team for a long time.
Okay, but to make a point there, so you've just mentioned Pulisic, who was at left wing after lockdown last season, who was making those differences that you talk about, that influence that we're talking about. And then for how many weeks is Pulisic on the right wing while Werner continues to stink up at the place on the left wing? Like I said,
I'm not. You know me, we do a pod all the time. I'm not agreeing with Pulisic playing on the right-hand side, so don't try and counter it.
No. It's just a point to make because, like I said, if we are talking about influence, we have influences from last season, like Con said earlier, that we aren't using. I don't think he was saying the whole team has been here for 18 months, but he's saying we have assets that we had last season that we need to learn from and use that this season to our advantage. So when we speak about Pulisic, who is at left wing influencing games on his own and is still playing extremely well, and then we stick him out on right wing for a Timo Werner who has, let's be honest, been very poor, and there has been no change tactically to the way that he plays the game at left wing for weeks, then that is a bit of criticism that you have to have. And like I said, I'm still Lampard in, but we can't shy away from the fact that he's not helping himself at times by playing players out of position. That is something that is going on.
But my thing is,
that's a critique we're all making. But Matisse, what would Lampard say to you in return of why he's doing that? We might not agree with it, but he's also trying to have Timo Werner be a player that can take over a game. Now, we're all done with it. We don't want to see him on the left wing, but it's a lot more infuriating when Pulisic's on the right-hand side for Mason Mount, who's playing on the wing. That makes sense.
Can I just quickly say, we all agree Pulisic left wing, Matisse, what he was saying, stinking up, not Matisse, sorry, Werner's stinking up the gaff on the left wing. Apparently, and we'll all agree on that, apparently there was some method to that madness with Pulisic playing on the right. He obviously played a lot under Frank Lampard when Werner hasn't. He understands pressing a little bit more and when to track back in transition. And with Reece James at right back, apparently Pulisic offered a little bit more cover when Reece James is there rather than Werner when he wouldn't be able to do it at all. Yeah. And of course, Ben Chilwell was a little bit more defensively sound.
Not like to argue what you said, Jan, but I don't want.
I don't condone it. I don't condone it, Con. I'm just saying.
Willian was played on the right because of having Hazard, but he also started for Chelsea all the time because how good he was defensively. And I don't want it to happen to Pulisic because he's our right sparking attack. Do you know what I mean?
But what's wrong with that though? That's him developing his overall game.
No, you said you want players to take the game by the scruff of the neck.
My point's getting fizzled here. We all agree we want to see Pulisic on the left wing. That's where he does his magic. He was our most prominent attacker last season, like talismanic potential. I know Con absolutely loves Pulisic, and he's right to do so. I'm just saying, and not rightly, I'm not saying it's right. I agree it's a wrong decision. But in theory, when you're a manager under pressure and you need to be able to defend from your wingers in transition, that's why Willian is adored by managers across the Premier League, and why Mikel Arteta wanted him so much. He knew Pulisic was going to do that because he's had enough time for him to cover for Reece James when Reece James gets forward. Ben Chilwell's a great defensive left back as well. He's a sort of balanced. And when Azpilicueta came in the right back position, what do you see? Pulisic goes, he jumps straight over to the left wing. So that was Lampard's thinking. But I don't care. Although I was just trying to offer that caveat of there was theory, method behind the madness, but I personally, as a football fan, don't agree with that. I think we lose too much from moving Pulisic over, so I think that's probably the general consensus.
But, okay, let me just touch on that very quickly so I can hear Younes talk. It's been a while. But, okay, I'm hearing that argument about, Pulisic, Werner, but for me, how strong are these reasons behind the performances? Because, a part of me is like, we all know COVID's injuries. I think by now, I don't even have to list the reasons behind some of the downfall this season, but there's been so many, things we'd have to overcome. And it's quite obvious when we've had no proper pre-season or any real time in the training ground to really condition anything and coach strong tactics that, you have to use these games in a way to coach what Lampard's really trying to do, because we can't keep, okay, we only play a certain way when we have X, Y, Z players in the team, and then when they're not, we'll play a completely different way. That doesn't bring any momentum. That doesn't really do anything. So I do feel like because we're still in that second year phase, in this COVID year too, I feel like more patience is needed. And as I keep saying, let's stop constantly just like judging things by the negatives without asking why. There's always reasons behind it. There's a technical stuff behind this stuff all the time. Lampard won't just play Pulisic for no reason because he's boys with Werner. And this is a coach, this is a manager who has to analyze the team against the opposition, and he has to pick the best solutions at the time with the options he's got given.
100%, but also this isn't an experienced manager. That's the difference. And I think that's why people will question him more, because he's not a Mourinho or a Klopp or a Carlo Ancelotti. He is a very inexperienced manager. So as we say, as he's learning on the job,
but what does age got to do with anything?
He will make mistakes.
On a real though, like what does so many young managers these days?
Nini, hold on. He will make mistakes, right? We've actually all said that he will make mistakes. Everybody here, I think, when he joined, said he's going to make mistakes. There's going to be a learning process. So when he makes the mistakes, of course, there's going to be criticism and there's going to be opinions as to why is he making these mistakes. When he played Batshuayi over Giroud last season, I don't know too many people who actually thought that was a good idea. And again, unless we're going to keep thinking of more reasons as to why that's okay. But I think sometimes Lampard sets himself higher standards than the people who defend him. I defend him. I'm still Lampard in, but I still set standards, bottom line standards that he has to meet. And I think for someone that came in who said, like I said, he's still ambitious. He said at the start of the season he wanted to challenge. He wanted to have the mentality to challenge. Bare minimum top 4, I think, is what his expectation is. Yeah. Lampard as a player and as a manager and as a man has high expectations. So why do we continue to keep dropping them?
But who says that we are? I'm just talking about, instead of just throwing like shit on the wall, basically, just to find like any negative to stick on Lampard. Because here's the thing: if you want us to be like objective on like a different level and scale, we could break down every reason we're saying, analyze the why behind it, and I'm sure, can we really say at the end of it that our opinion is just the concrete right one? I don't think so.
That. Yeah,
we can do that
for every manager. We can do that for every manager.
I think you can. And I think you can, though, because obviously, like, in the sport, for me, I just think that, I've started to realize that, and it's completely okay. Certain people love to talk about, like, the storylines behind what happens, but not care about the technical stuff that makes those storylines happen. Like I was bringing up that example about cinema before, how we'll watch a TV show, get engaged in the storyline, but at the same time, understand that there's a technical stuff happening with the CGI, acting, stunt work that makes this happen. And I kind of think football's the same way, because when we watch it, we're getting entertained, the spectacle, the storylines, people are, saying things afterwards like, there's lots of hyperbolic stuff. Is Lampard good enough? What if we don't get top 4? Just all these negative hypotheticals where I don't even really think the evidence right now suggests that we should be that fearful at this point in time. Once the future comes, as the weeks go on, once I've personally seen more, like, for example, what if Lampard's go-to system isn't good enough? If I see that, I'll happily say it. But I just think that I've realised we don't include both discussions together. Like, in the fan base with the divides, I feel it personally comes from one side that just talks about the storylines, the emotions, and the other side that talks about the technical stuff behind the game. But, like, just as we all, like, analyse or criticise a film, whatever, people appreciate both parts behind it. So, why is it that we constantly focus on one side of the story all the time?
Can I ask Younes a question? And then, Nini, as you know, I got to go. So for everybody watching, It's about to be dad life for Alex, so I loved it, and I'm going to go have a lot happier of a time. Even though this has been enjoyable, I'm just going to dive into a 15-month-year-old life. But Younes, I'm just going to kind of leave you with this, and I'll watch back and hear your answer. Kind of piggybacking off what Nini was just saying, not cutting a huge excuse for Lampard, I genuinely just want to know your answer. How much slack does Lampard get where every single player pretty much that he would want to grab the game by the scruff of the neck, right? Like I was saying earlier, Pulisic, Kai Havertz, Timo Werner, Ziyech, and even Hudson-Odoi. So Pulisic, the one reason why we might not be able to cater around him a lot is he's in his own way. He gets injured at the wrong times. And hey, this last weekend was historic for Pulisic, the fact that he started 2 games in 3 days. But normally he is somebody that we can't depend on yet, which is kind of an issue. So Lampard gets no continuity with Pulisic. Kai Havertz knew right when things were getting going, he got COVID, and then he's just been all over the place. Callum Hudson-Odoi, Lampard probably has not leaned on him enough, but right when it probably looked like he would, when Ziyech got injured in that game, Hudson-Odoi the next day gets the same exact injury. And then Ziyech, who clearly maybe Lampard has leaned on too much, at least in his planning, obviously has now been injured twice. So how much slack do you cut for Lampard just this season, knowing that a crap load of players, and even Werner, who I think he's just waiting to actually get the ball in the back of the net, not hit a backside of a barn, but all those players that you would kind of assume you could lean on have given Lampard zero continuity, whether it be injuries, COVID, or some really appalling out of form stuff. And peace and love, guys. Love you all. Speak soon.
Take care, man. See you later. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I hope you have a good evening, man. But yeah, to answer your question, this is where my concern is, because if we have factors which is out of Lampard's control, understandably, injuries and you know, the timing, like, you know, at one point we were left with no wingers, understandable. But it's at that point where you look to the manager to try and create something and to bring a system where you are not heavily reliant on the wingers that you don't have. Yeah. And it's at that point where you just have to come up with something new or an alternative way.
But that's what I'm trying to say, though. So I'm even sorry to interrupt you in this. Apologies, man. But that's what I'm saying. The criticism always boils down to do something new. What is that new? No one ever discusses that new, and this is where the fantasy element comes into play for me, because you know you actually need to spend time with these guys to coach anything. So where is this time? So we just lost all 3 wingers just like that in the space of 1 week. Come on, you guys, come in at 12 o'clock at night time. We're doing an all-night so we can get ready for the game in 2 days. Like, how does that happen then?
This is, I mean, we're not at the training ground. You know, we don't know. But this is where I'm hoping the working training is going in.
You know what I mean?
This is the thing, though. I mean, when we can all pinpoint these things happening, and we're supporters on the outside, we would hope that on the inside, these things are being implemented and prepared for just in case. We are all in the same boat. You know, it's not just us that's been affected by COVID and all the circumstances.
Yeah,
all of us are playing a rough schedule.
It's fair to everyone. I'm not being selective with it. I just think it's made a shit in general.
I completely hear that, but this is the thing. When you look at other clubs who have had injuries, who have had had to tweak things up, but you look at development in terms of the clubs that are above us, and the way that they're actually still progressing and developing. Everton, Southampton, Aston Villa, even Man United have picked up form.
But that's
but
for
there's
now.
consistency.
But
they've had injuries.
Short. Yeah,
absolutely, and this is why I'm saying I'm hoping it's going to change, and I'm hoping that maybe we can bring a new element, and time will tell. But how long does Chelsea have, and how much time does Roman have, and how much time do we have before we fall down even further? This is why I'm hoping it's going to pick up, and we can bring a new element to our game. And this is why I'm a bit on the fence. I'm not, just throw him out now, because let's be realistic. If we did sack him now, who are we going to get in? I mean, we're not going to bring in Tuchel tomorrow. I mean, it's a bit restricted, and it's a bit dumb. But the questions are there, and the concern is there. And this is why I'm saying I don't think Roman will hesitate if it continues to fall. I'm hoping it doesn't. But this is where you look to the manager to implement something new and to try something new if you are working with what you have. It's as simple as that. And I'm hoping Lampard can. And I know that's my issue is, we know he's naive, we know he's inexperienced, and that's the kind of balance you don't want at a time like this where results aren't going your way. You want an experienced head. I'm just hoping he can find those solutions. Can he? Does he have it in his locker? That's the big question mark. That's the concern.
I definitely hear what you're saying. I definitely get those worries that we all have, and this is what we're here today to do, to just break down each other's opinions, understand them, and try and come to a positive conclusion or just a realistic conclusion on things. But I've also seen lots of managers way older than Lampard's who've had bigger reps, that have won lots of things, that have made tons of mistakes that we could say with lineups. I mean, Conte, I remember certain lineups, no Cesc playing, we were constantly raving about that. And then some of the strikers he was using up front, some of the formations, and people complain about Lampard's one-dimensional play, but under Conte, the reason why I just fell out of love with him is when I realised that this guy's cool way of playing fundamentally has its limits. It's not going to take you right to the top, as it's proven, because the guy does nothing in cup football. So, seeing Sarri as well, he had his own issues too, but to be honest, managing for Sarri is kind of the same as it is for Lampard. I felt like, when I look at the Sarri situation, he was a guy that he came close to make something happening. We were seeing that during the final moments of that season under him. And then, boom, just left, and all that good work was meant for nothing. And then another manager has to come and pick up that slack. So for me, I feel like there's been a lot of slack that Lampard's had to work with. And I know I'm seeing some of the stuff people say as excuses. Listen, I don't do excuses. I know sometimes that I talk with too much sentiment, but I just like people to understand where I'm coming from a real place, basically. That's why I do it. And I just think that Lampard's, me personally, I weigh the pros and cons, and I feel that the pros outweigh some of the cons, to be honest.
Neely, can I just pick up something Younes said? Because he made some good points, and we need to be balanced here as well. He talked about how clubs navigated a difficult time in Southampton, he said. Yeah. Hasenhüttl, Southampton, very, very good coach, very experienced. I'm not saying I'd want him over Frank. I want Frank Lampard for a bunch of reasons. But I want to say something that a lot of people probably won't want to hear. I think Chelsea Football Club probably realise that right now Frank Lampard isn't an amazing manager, but despite that, they've had a bit of vision, and they're like, this is what we want to invest in, because what we see here is an incredibly astute potential, student potential of the game. Someone that wants to play the right way, that's taking, inspiration from the right places, that knows the game, that knows the club. They've taken the whole package, and they're like, we would rather put 220 million into this guy than bring in someone a little bit more stable and proven. And that's why you get this turbulence. That's why certain clubs above us are navigating said turbulence in a better manner, because Chelsea are thinking ahead. They're thinking about what they want to do. They're thinking about what, even though Klopp was brought in, think about what he means to Liverpool now. Like, he will go down in folklore. They can see something in Lampard. They're like, you know what? This is the grand scheme. This is what we want. We're rolling the dice a little bit, but we've seen enough positivity, and we can see the mentality inside this man's head, and that's what we want to implement in Chelsea. Yes, Hasenhüttl and the likes might navigate with his experience, these turbulent times better, but you got to take the rough with the smooth in terms of the vision. There's a teething process. People don't want to hear that, and I can understand that. And it might not work, which makes it even worse, But the fact of the matter is, this is the vision. This is the idea. He's impressed enough people. And if you ask some neutrals, some football analysts, Michael Cox, these analysts, authors and stuff, they will tell you from a completely unemotional stance, yes, he's seen enough. I'm not 100% convinced, but they wouldn't say, yeah, Lampard should be sacked from Chelsea. Yeah. They'd be like, no, look at what's happening. This is what's happening. This is the kind of football he's tried to implement. Can I promise you it's going to work? No. Should you sack Frank Lampard? They'd say, no, look around. Look what's happening. That would be foolish. Yeah. And that's, hopefully a dose of sensible realism. And I just wanted to pick up because of Younes talking about the clubs above.
Yeah, okay.
Can I ask you guys a quick question, if that's all right?
Yeah, come in, man.
I saw loads of people saying Arsenal was a must-win game, right? We lose it. We say Aston Villa's a must-win game. We don't win it. How many more must-wins do we have to go through until, I don't know, something changes? Because are we just saying it for the sake of that at the moment, or do we actually mean it?
Because... No, you're 100% right. Now, for me, Arsenal was, the result, for me, it was the performance over the result that I did. I'm a very, very, measured guy, and I lost it on my YouTube channel after that game. You know, I was pretty disgusted with the performance. And then with Villa, because they're such a good team, you look at their record for 4 games. They didn't concede in like 9.5 hours before Giroud scored that goal, and they just got there on heightened confidence belief, completely opposite of us. I was a little bit disappointed with the result, but you know, the performance was better. I get what you're saying, Con. I think your question goes back to what we said at the beginning of the stream, or what Younes probably said in his first sort of statement. How bad does it have to get before Roman pulls the trigger? Now, if you said to me personally, I'd ask the financial department at Chelsea, I'd say, right, what can you deal with? Can you get to the point where the end of the season and assess Lampard then and say, look, mate, you finished 6th. You've got to go. This is Chelsea Football Club. And Frank would probably go, yeah, you know what? I know what Chelsea's all about. I've got to go. But you know, how long's a piece of string in the meantime? If Chelsea look like they're completely out of the running for European football, you know, then get a new coach in and let him start implementing his ideas for the next season, and say so that Chelsea can try and win the title when he's got extra games. But it has to look like a hopeless ordeal for me.
Okay, I'll let someone, you know, take that. Of course, son of Chelsea. I know that you've been contemplating there in the corner. What's your take on everyone's thoughts so far?
I don't think we appreciate, and maybe, you know, we talked, I can't remember who it was, someone talking about we project things onto football at the time. And I think it's a mistake we all make, right? I projected sort of this feeling that when Frank Lampard came in, not only all the baggage of Frank Lampard being my hero and all of that, and, you know, the first football player I knew the name of and all that stuff, it was the sense that after Sarri, I felt like this was the chance for Chelsea to really go in a new direction and build a new philosophy, build a new identity, for Lampard to sort of build a new culture, basically, and try and move the club in a different direction, or at least something longer lasting effects, you know. And I think that even if Lampard was to get sacked at the end of this season, I think it's undeniable he's put things in place that other managers haven't when they've left. You know, I think there's been a case in recent years where coaches leave and we may have some amazing memories with them, but they don't really leave a lot to go by after that. You know, it's sort of, it all gets blown up and that's it, you know, and then we have to rebuild. I think, you know, Lampard's integration of young players into this team, I think, is undeniably his best achievement so far. It's his strongest sort of part of his coaching, I think, in terms of the way he's brought Mason Mount in, the way he's brought Reece James in, Tammy Abraham. I know, obviously not now, but last season we saw Fikayo Tomori, Billy Gilmore. It really was a revolution in terms of what I'd been used to. I mean, at the back end of Sarri's year, it was amazing just seeing Callum and Ruben in the first team, and then seeing multiple players in the. It was incredible how and my hope is the long-lasting effect of Frank Lampard's reign is that glass ceiling has now been shattered. I hope this isn't just a side effect and a nice sort of, you know, sideshow that we give young players a bit of time because we've had a transfer ban. This should now be commonplace, that there is a realistic route from the academy to the first team. I think when I'm listening to the criticism of Lampard, and it's something that does irritate me a lot, and I hear similar with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, to be honest, and I've heard it with different managers. The double standard of criticism really does annoy me, and I want to say this before we end this stream, because it is something that just irritates me a lot in terms of the responsibility of a manager when things are going wrong compared to when they're going well. I have listened to critics of Lampard, and I've listened to critics of Solskjaer talk about his failings, talk about him being tactically inept, talked about him not being good enough to coach a team as big as Chelsea, and his failings, like we've spoken about today, the positioning of certain players, the tactics, you know, plan A, plan B, all of that stuff. They'll sort of put almost 100% responsibility on the coach when things go wrong. It's like, you are the reason things are going wrong, and if we remove you from the club, then everything goes back to being fine and normal. We start winning the league again. When I bring up the other side of that debate, when we talk about players Lampard has improved, or when Lampard has got things right, like when Lampard's Chelsea batters Bielsa a few weeks ago, the excuse that's given is, well, we have good players, we're going to win anyway most of the time. And I just want to say to people who are Lampard out, I think that's a really lazy argument. I think it's a real big get out of jail free card that I think needs to be confronted and addressed, because you can use it in any example to get out of giving Lampard credit for anything. Because if he's responsible for these players when everything goes wrong, then surely by that same logic, the same weight should be applied when things are going right. Now, I think there should be more nuance to that. As I think we all know, it's not as simple as that. We're not playing FIFA career mode here. But I think that the issue for me is when we're talking about Lampard, right, is he responsible? Like, if I say that I think he's improved Mason Mount, and you turn around and go, well, Mason Mount's a good talent anyway, he would have got to that level anyway. Well, then what's the point in a coach to begin with? Why do we have a coach? You know, I just that's my irritation with criticism I'm seeing recently. I have criticism of Lampard. I absolutely do, right? I have criticism with the positioning. I think some of his substitutions recently have been quite baffling. But I think that when we're talking about Lampard, there needs to be pros and cons. And unfortunately, with the way social media is, it's constantly one way or the other. We're either, if we beat Man City, I guarantee if I was to go on Twitter, despite, sort of going off it recently, I can guarantee it's back to propaganda about us winning the Premier League and propaganda about us being the most amazing team. And look how amazing all of our players are, right? I think a lot of people projected stuff onto this team this season, or at least when it was going sort of well recently, that, probably wasn't there. I think that, and that's the issue. If you project, it's a bit like the film analogy, I think, is a brilliant one in terms of Star Wars films. Like, people go and watch Star Wars films, and the backlash to those films now is because people expect their Star Wars film to happen in front of them, and then when it isn't given to them, they get annoyed. They're not experiencing the film in front of them. They're annoyed because it isn't the film they envisioned in their head. So I think we all have to take some blame as fans of that, because I think we project a lot of storylines and narrative and emotion into a competitive sport that isn't always going to give you the most clarity.
I think, of course, man, I know you're cooking up some thoughts, man. How do you feel about what Daniel said? Like, obviously, what's your honest take?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. I think it's difficult because a lot of the logic we're using, we don't usually always use this logic. And like I keep saying, now when we're seeing mistakes with Frank Lampard that people are pointing out, not saying anything, not saying that he needs to leave and everything, but there's valid criticism for some things that he's doing as a manager in charge. He's not perfect.
What's like one of the main valid ones?
I've mentioned so many times, but there's valid criticism for Frank Lampard. No one can sit here and tell me there's nothing that he's doing wrong. There's no criticism. So once we've established that, that's point number one. But why are we now trying to think of reasons as to why I applaud it, but we're now starting to think of reasons why we're wrong, and we're trying to think of reasons as to why our criticism makes no sense when we have already established that he's learning, he's going to make mistakes. We would never do this. This has never been done. In my opinion, I've never seen it done. I've never seen a manager who's making mistakes and people, instead of voicing their criticism like a normal fan, are now trying to come up with reasons as to why it makes sense. I've never seen that, personally.
Could I just say, I think that I think the effect of Sarri's year, I think already has been sort of underestimated in terms of what it did, I think, to Chelsea fans. I think that the divide between fans that year, I was someone who wanted Sarri to stay and succeed. I'm not saying this is Humities, and I absolutely agree that I think that there needs to be consistency, right? But that's just what I was talking about, right? I'm not saying that you can't criticize Frank Lampard. Let me make that absolutely clear, right? I'm not saying if you criticize Frank Lampard and have doubts about him being the right manager for Chelsea, you are not a Chelsea fan. That's not what I'm saying, right? So let's stop, straw manning, in terms of what the opposite argument. I think that happens a lot of the time as well. We extreme and sort of build up the opposite side of the argument to sort of break it down quite easily. That's not what I'm saying. I think that I do get a sense that Sarri, because of what happened that year and the way, let's talk about social media, the divide between fans that year in terms of, to simplify it, match-going fans, maybe more online fans, if you want to sort of, I know that's quite sort of a brutal and quite a simplistic way of looking at it, but I don't know if my sense is, I think because people got annoyed because of the way Sarri was treated, am I wrong in thinking that there's a bit of backlash towards Lampard because of that? Because now the match-going fans, once again, we don't, there's no match-going fans at the moment, but I think that there's a bit of a conflict there, and I think that sort of this divide we're seeing again, I feel, is just the sort of an after effect of Sarri. And my concern is beyond Lampard. We keep on seeing this for every manager, depending on who it is and what type of coach they are. I worry that we're going to struggle to have any unity within the fan base. Sorry if I'm rambling.
No, sorry, Mark, really quickly. Just I think I find it an interesting point because it's almost like the revenge of the people who perceive the Lampard fans as like proper Brexit Chelsea. Do you know what I mean? Like super Frankie Lampard, mate. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you know what I mean? Like they're like, well, you just want to get drunk and talk about the past about Lampard. When that's not the case. Like we're all young intellectual guys here that are dissecting the tactics of football. But there is like a bit of a storm with that. So yeah, go on, Matt. I didn't want to interrupt, mate.
No, I definitely worry, and I completely agree with Daniel's point. It's probably spot on. I am worried about the future in terms of this back and forth. For someone that's backed and is patient with both managers, but criticised Sarri as well. When he brought on Zappa Costa against Manchester United, but I didn't try and think of reasons as to why that made sense. Yeah, iconic. But I didn't try and think of reasons as to why that made sense. I just called it how it is. That's the difference for me in terms of the way that we analyze this situation. And I think the reason why we do analyze it the way we are right now is because we are so emotionally wrapped up with who is actually in charge. That's what people's criticisms are. And I think it's difficult to get onto people who are not as an emotionally attached because maybe they've been able to actually disconnect properly and separate manager between player, which is what a lot of people have.
That's what you're saying. That's very interesting because this is what I mean by this constant, like, we all argue the same side of the coin, basically, I feel, like I was trying to say before, some people argue from like the emotive side, the spectacle sides, the storylines, and obviously some just talk about the technical part. And for me, the conversation has to be a fusion of both. You know what I mean? No one's saying that you only talk about football one way because we can consume entertainment because football is an entertainment. At the end of the day, we can pretend, we can have so many crazy heightened emotions surrounding our club, but at the end of the day, this is just an entertainment. So I do feel like there's this perspective all the time that is constantly forgotten about, and it's why conversations constantly turn towards the vicious, constantly turn towards unnecessary battles. I mean, how many times I've got into debates on Twitter where I'm debating this guy, he's not getting what I'm saying, and I know why he's not, because I haven't worded it exactly how I would want to read it. But I'm just thinking, bruv, you should understand what I'm saying. It's the same sentiment. You know what I mean? It's the sentiment behind the stuff. And, I do feel like, at times, again, everything becomes about the storyline. Everything becomes about, these crazy what-if scenarios. Everything's only focused on negativity all the time. And any time the discussion becomes about the what-if in the future, why is the immediate reaction, despair and gloom and, talks of what if Lampard doesn't even get top 4 now? We've been in worse situations over the years where we know when the crisis has
Sorry,
hit.
Nick, can I just make a point about that?
Yeah, come on, man.
I feel like with that, I don't think that has anything to do with football right now, to be honest. I feel like the way the world's in, people's just outlook's negative anyway, because it's not a good time.
That on football. That's
of
why
course, because that's their getaway, isn't it? Like everyone's football, like right now is getaway is football. When you're seeing your team do bad, you're gonna be a bit more irrational than you normally are because of how you.
That's what I mean. That's because I see that's the divide. Because not everyone does. Some people do, some people don't. For me, it's about the conversations mixed together. You can talk about both. I mean, the way we talk about films, I can talk about, oh my God, you see that crazy action scene, blah, blah, blah. And then I can talk about the CGI behind, why that thing even happened in the first place. And, I feel like we're all kind of saying things that are all like, everyone's piece and perspective is adding up to create this full picture. You know what I mean? So, and I feel like that's what we constantly forget sometimes.
I feel like I want to make a point. Sorry, I want to make a point and say, in terms of really analysing what the manager is doing, have Chelsea fans as a whole, if we talk about the fan base, have we really truly separated the player from the manager? And I understand Lampard is a legend. I mean, I even no matter what happens, I think as a player, his legacy is intact. That should not be, touched whatsoever. But if it wasn't Lampard and if it was someone else, would there still be the same element of trying to, protect or hope that things get better rather than like in previous managers we've seen where things go wrong and we go, you know what, he's not up to it. My concern is, I hope that there is a level of separating the player from the manager, because when we look at it, even if we talk statistically, and I don't really like to use this because it was two separate teams, but Lampard at the moment is on the same ratio as AVB was back when AVB was our manager. And I understand that at that time we had Lampard, for example, as our player, and Didier and all of them lot. So he really should have gotten better out of them. But when we look at what the end product is and the result, which is what matters at the end of the day, and this is my concern because I hope it gets better and it doesn't cause Roman to pull the trigger. But have we really truly separated player from manager? Are we too emotional on the fact that it is Lampard, or are we judging him correctly? I actually want to ask you guys that, to be honest.
I will, if Nini, if you don't mind, I'll quickly say that.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah. Straight answer with Younes obviously is leading in the sense of we need to, and the answer I'd argue is no, not fully. Certainly because he is probably Chelsea's greatest ever player. That's quite a unique. It's not Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, which was a big player for United. It is Frank Lampard. He personifies Chelsea. Like he is Chelsea. So it's a very, very difficult situation. Younes said, like, if this was another manager in this situation, he'd probably be canned. But again, context is required, and we've got to go back to the earlier parts of the stream of what Frank did at the beginning. Frank, in the first season, he's got some good grace. He brought the kids through because of his coaching staff, because of his belief in the youngsters. He secured top 4 against the odds after losing his best player. As an inexperienced coach, you can't. It's almost moot point to say, would we do this with another coach? Because this would never happen with another coach. We would never hire a coach with no managerial experience. Yeah. So you have to. It's a
is
pointless...
that the right thing to do? Exactly, that's my point.
Yeah,
is that the right thing to do?
It's to a degree, it's a pointless exercise to try and separate them and judge him in isolation as a coach, because you have to take it all in together, because this would never happen with a coach, and because of that, because of the good grace, because of the positive work he's done, and because of what the club is investing in him as a product, you have to take all of that into account. So therefore, you have to judge him as Frank Lampard, the right now manager and ex-player. But as time goes on, we will slowly peel away from the ex-player. But at the moment, you simply can't. You inherently can't, because of what's happening and what has recently just happened.
Yeah, I think it was unrealistic to expect that to be any different, to be honest. Especially, we got close to winning an FA Cup, and I can sit here right now and tell you winning an FA Cup with Frank would mean as much to me as winning a Premier League, right? And I've never felt that with any other coach. Right, like I would be happy if someone said to me right now, Frank Lampard is only going to win an FA Cup with you. I would take
it to the bank, mate.
I would take that to the bank, and it would be the best FA Cup win we've ever had. Right, I would see it as, because it would mean a lot. I think it's very hard for me personally to it is Frank Lampard, right? And I think the unique circumstances, the perfect storm that arose in the summer of 2019, where you had this coach that was leaving, that had set up something where we were sort of transitioning from a counter-attacking team to a progressive team, and you sort of there was something building there, and you sort of wanted to see it move on. But as well, the fan base was completely divided at that point, and it felt like there was even though we just won a Europa League, and in a great way, there was such sort of a dismal mood around the club. Someone needed to come in at that point and at least calm things down, a bit at least. And I think that it just is naturally difficult. It is Frank Lampard. I can't get away from that. And I'm sorry if that annoys people, that I can't exactly separate him from, say, a Sarri, even though I gave Sarri my full back in, just like I gave Conte my full back in, just like I'll give any other future manager my full back in, right? But Frank Lampard winning anything with Chelsea, being successful, I think it's the long-lasting effect it will have. I think there needs to be an appreciation of that as well, right? I don't think, honestly, I can ever clinically just, cut it off and say, oh, it's just a guy who's managing Chelsea and his name is Frank Lampard, or we happen to play for us in the past. And as Yana said before, it's a once-in-a-lifetime deal, this. Unless JT turns out to be an amazing coach, and in the future, or Didier turns out to be an amazing coach and comes back, it's going to be very difficult for a situation like this to happen again. So I think that there's a case of valuing that, in the sense that when in our lifetimes will we see something like this again, sort of almost a dream scenario. Like if you would have told me 10 years ago Frank Lampard would be Chelsea manager, that would have sounded like a ludicrous scenario. So I think there's a bit of preserving that and wanting to see it just it go through, you know, and I know that's that annoys some people because they want Chelsea to go back to sort of the ruthless way we were before and not allow any leeway. But I think Maurizio Sarri, who arrived at Chelsea, you know, his first job in English football, compared to Frank Lampard, I don't think you can get too annoyed with the fact that there was going to be people who were going to judge them differently. That was just the way it was going to be.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. Obviously, there's always going to be an emotional attachment for a lot of people. I just remember when he first came in, and obviously what he said to us. I think we have to remember that. Sometimes even go back and watch that press conference. I think a lot of people were, me included. I think Con will probably want to say something on this after me, but we had our concerns with him coming in this early because we didn't feel like he was ready. And obviously once he's come in, everyone will back him as you would. It's Frank Lampard, for God's sake. But before he got here, there were legitimate concerns that we were throwing him in the deep end into a fan base, into a club that's not ready for him. Because yes, it's great to do it last season when the expectations aren't there, but now there are expectations that you have to meet. And it's not great seeing someone that, for me, is not at the pinnacle of their powers in management, because we couldn't be patient enough to bring him in when he was ready, 100% ready, because I think we can all agree that he's probably not at his peak of his powers in his managerial career. So once again, Chelsea, for me, impatient. And this is what I said when he came in. I feel like we have prioritized our own needs as a football club to get ourselves through a sticky situation over what was actually best for Frank Lampard. He was never going to reject the job. Of course he wasn't. But did we have his own managerial career, best interest as fans and as a club when we brought him in? And it actually makes me very sad to speak about it. Because he's my favourite player of all time. And I have to watch people lose their shit about him. I'm losing my shit. And for me, this didn't have to happen. People say this was the only way because we had a transfer ban. No, it wasn't. No, it was not. You could have had Jody as an assistant to someone else or part of the backroom staff for someone else. And instead, I have to watch a legend, for the reason that I grew up supporting this club, get torn to shreds because we couldn't be patient enough to wait until he got to the prime of his career.
Or getting torn to shreds by people's ignorance because they don't know the game that much sometimes. Maybe that could be a reason as well. But why can't it be a reason as well? Why is it that you're talking from your perspective as if that's the only one anyone can have? There's a completely different one.
No, Nini. You said to me on another stream that if he finishes fifth, it's okay. It's not okay.
No, I did not say that. Again, this is what I mean by the world today. People take stupid sound bites and then they just project all this bullshit. That was not what I said. What I said was the question was so far-fetched. I'm not going to waste my time thinking about what if Lampard was to get top four out of the top four? Because our season isn't that bad just yet.
But that is a hypothetical that can happen, right? So then you have to think about what would be your decision if that was to happen. And like I keep saying, this didn't have to happen. We didn't have to go down this line. And for me, what I keep saying is that we just because this is Frank Lampard, it doesn't mean that you can't expect others to be objective. I know that you can't expect others to just completely blindly say, right, we have to all sing from the same mouthpiece, and we're not gonna actually hold some sort of foundation here, which is top four for me. You still have to do that.
Nini, can I just make a point that's relevant to both Matt and Dan, what he's just said? Because I'm 100%. I can really read off the same hymn sheet of what Dan said. Sentiment like this will never happen again in Chelsea's history. The top goal scorer, greatest player, intelligent, present well, spokesperson, icon will never manage Chelsea again. It's a once in a lifetime. So you have that. And what Matisse is saying, I'm not going to swear. I made a freaking video on why I was terrified of Chelsea hiring Frank Lampard. I was tweeting on it. I was and for the same reasons what Dan's just said and what Matisse has just said. I was terrified because I love my club, but my club murders managers. And I was like, oh my God, and this is where sentiment inherently comes in. I will feel so. I mean, we'll get over it. Football's, football. I mean, it always hurt, but football moves on so quickly. I was terrified. And this is that's why both points are good, Matisse and Dan. But I saw him settle in. I saw him do a good job in his first season, beyond good, and I saw him going, no, this is not good enough. Even recently, when we went on this 14-game winning streak or whatever, and Jurgen Klopp had a hard-on for him, trying to get inside his head, saying, oh, we made Chelsea going to win the league. Frank never got excited. He was like, no, we've got so far to go. This guy's seeing what's happening on the pitch. Frank's not watching what's going on now, going, oh, he's probably thinking, to him, this is no way near good enough, because when we were on that 14 winning game streak, he was like, nope, this is not good enough. This is not the product that I want to create. This is not my vision. This is not my vision. So that's why I back him, because he's got the vision. My sentiment will always be there, because I'm sorry, I apologize to the people who don't like Frank Lampard. I will always have sentiment for him. But because he's got this vision, and I don't know what you said, Nini, of what your minimal requirements is, but the fact of the matter is there's financial implications with the club, and Chelsea are a business. If he doesn't achieve certain things, he will go, and it will be sad, and it might be a waste, and it might be the incorrect decision in terms of Frank's long-term success at Chelsea. If I could see into the future, Frank might finish 6th this season, 3rd the next season, and then he might win 4 Premier Leagues in a row. But we won't get afforded the opportunity to see that. So
can I just quickly say, sorry to keep speaking, I just want to quickly say this. On top of that, I had the same fear that Matisse had. I had the same fear that Jan had. It's still on there. I encourage anyone to go and read this article I wrote for the Chelsea Echo like a week before the Europa League final, when we started being linked with Lampard as manager, where I literally said it would be a horrendous move to bring in Frank Lampard. I literally, the exact words, and I have to live with that, right? I'm absolutely fine with that being that I wrote at the time, and I absolutely had that concern. I remember being on a stream with Younes and saying the exact same things, and saying my concern is, why are we bringing in a coach at this point when the fan base is so divided, right? But I agree with Jan. I think it's not just on him. It's not just on, it's Lampard. It's what I've actually seen in front of me. It's what the development I saw last year, the good performances I've seen this year, and wanting to give something a little bit more time than we haven't before. It's not just all dreams and all just because it's Lampard and he's my hero. It's stuff I have seen within the team as well. Like I think that last season was big proof of that. And yeah, it's been a sticky few weeks and some really poor results and performances, but they're no worse than what I've seen in previous years, right? And I think that's sort of what I'm looking at. I'm looking at Chelsea not through the lens of what we were doing in 04-05 and judging it based on that. I'm judging it based on recently. I'm judging it based on the fact that we've been a club challenging for the Champions League places, and Lampard's job is to get beyond that now.
I think
I just wanted to say, Ma, I do agree with what you said there, because at the end of the day, as I've said, this is going to come to a point where if top 4 is in danger of not happening, which we don't know what's going to happen. Time will tell. And as I said earlier on, this is why I hope things get better. But if it comes to a point where we start to see a big gap and top 4 is more than likely not going to happen, that's where I think Roman will probably pull that trigger. And Lampard, as inexperienced as he is, and this is where I don't want the sentiment to really come in and become a factor, because we really need to differentiate between the legend and the man who is inexperienced as a manager and looking to get better. And I sympathize with Jan and what you said about his vision, because obviously we know how intelligent he is and how smart he is as a person, and I'm sure he has ideas he wants to implement, which he hopes he gets the time for. The truth of the matter is, though, it's a results-based business. It needs to change, and he needs to find a way. And even if that means going against his philosophy and going against what he wants to do in the long run, he has to get the result.
But did Lampard not do that, though? Because here's the thing. Sorry to just interject, because it adds on to what you're saying. Obviously, there's been a lot of criticisms in regards to certain youth players not getting more game time, like your Tomoris, your Hudson-Odois, etc., etc. And at the start of last season, we saw more a priority towards younger players in the team. But I think as time went on, obviously because using so many young players in the team together, these guys aren't like fully developed. There were lots of individual mistakes at times, which, when you're competing at a top 4 level, not a Premier League level, but a top 4 level, I feel like the moments for mistakes become they become less. You can't make any mistakes at all. And I felt like Lampard actually did change his philosophy a bit by incorporating more experience. I think when Rudiger was making his introduction back into the team last season, that was like the evident sign that that Lampard is doing that, and I think that's why we signed Thiago in the summer. And I think the plan was to have that mixture of youth and experience instead of just talented youth. We're not hearing Lampard say anymore that talent has no age anymore. He's not saying those things. It's different things like competing, competition, stuff like that. And this is what I mean by, sometimes these talks can just become a bit too focused on, okay, one part of the argument only talks about the negative. I'm only talking about the positive, but then we're only talking from one side of the extremes. You know what I mean? I feel like now, as we're talking, I'm starting to get the perspective more to link it in, because for me, I do feel like some of the critique can be a bit too extreme against Lampard, when in fact, a lot of the things people have said, he has shown the signs that, he has adapted and he has made those changes.
Sorry, could I make a point quickly?
Yeah, go for it.
I feel like whether people are Lampard in or out, I don't blame either side, because you know what? It's such guesswork right now. Nobody knows for sure what's going to happen, and it's not like we have that previous from Lampard that we can judge it on. So under Conte, if we went under a slump, we're like, oh, he won us a league and he's done prior with Juventus. Lampard hasn't had that, so I don't blame any fan for still backing him or saying, I don't think this is the guy, because we just don't know. But Nini, the point you make about the young players and inexperience, the counterpoint to that is we have one of the younger sides in the league. So with all these congested fixtures, we should be able to, be fitter than most teams we're playing against.
But why would that? But that's what I mean. That's not coming from a fair take.
How's that not fair? That's the counterpoint to what you just said.
But then that's what I mean. You gotta apply so many things to that. You gotta apply how COVID, this congested period, injuries have all affected players' staminas. This is not just like we've got perfect conditions right now and we're like talking about the current situation based on perfect conditions. These conditions ain't been perfect at all. So why is it that it's got to be like the harshest eye? And this is what I've been constantly saying. Why is it judging on the negative?
I don't see this excuse used for any other team more than Chelsea.
But I don't think it's an excuse. I think if we only care about black and white things, then it sounds like an excuse.
This excuse about the COVID and injuries, I've never seen a fan base use it more than Chelsea.
But that's what I'm trying to say, because again, everything's just divide for the sake of it. We can incorporate both our answers together instead of it having to be my answer's better than yours, because let's stop pretend that what I'm saying isn't a reality behind what's happening behind the scenes too. I'm not making shit up, taking out from my ass and making stuff up. I'm not doing none of that stuff. This is what I've noticed based on years of watching football, reading the game, analysing the game, trying to learn more about it. It's not some FIFA shit, man.
No, I think it's important to note at this point that for all like the good points that's been made, that there has been mistakes that have been made of late, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing. Like we've all, I think every single one of us has explained how, we'd like it to be a success regardless whether we're a Lampard in or out. But I think one thing we're agreeing is that he very much is learning on the job, even if he is a relatively qualified and's got great ideas. If you said to Lampard, this is the captain hindsight, you would make changes. I think I would have liked to see a couple of players rotated in, but I understand and I also have sympathy for the fact how he didn't, because he might have been feeling the pressure and he might have been panicking. And when you panic, what do? You look at your squad and you go, right, who's played through these situations? Who's like a calm head? Who is like? And although I don't necessarily want to see Jorginho play, I can have sympathy for why Lampard turns to at the moment of pressure, and he'll reflect now, probably going, balls, I shouldn't have done that. I should have done this. I made a selection mistake or whatever. So I think Con makes some good points, and it can't be pushed aside that it's not been immaculate and there is problems, and that's why we're having this debate. That's why you started the stream, because we there's stuff we need to reflect on. But as much as I'm Lampard in, I have great sympathy for his take on this, and I don't think it should be swept aside, basically.
Okay, I wasn't obviously dismissing it.
I'm not suggesting you were. I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not
I know what you mean in general.
But
like you're saying in general, like no one should obviously just dismiss points, and that's what I'm just trying to just acknowledge as well. And yeah, 100% I agree with that take, man. But I do want to move the discussion on, because I do think we have to wrap things up probably in the next half an hour.
I've actually got to bow out, bro, because
of course. Yeah, you said before.
Yeah, so I just want to say thanks for having me on, and also thanks for putting this debate on, Nini. I think this is exactly what a lot of us in the call would have wanted. I feel like, voicing our opinions and feelings, and I imagine a lot of the viewers feel the same. So great idea, man. Well done for putting it together. And thanks for having me on.
Of course, man. I appreciate that, man. Of course, you guys, everyone who's participated tonight, all the information is on the screen right now. So you guys know what to do. Give Football Therapy a follow on YouTube, Twitter as well. But, to continue on, because, for the latter part, I do want to get to the Super Chat questions. We aren't going to get through them. But I guess now the conversation can even become more focused. But to move on, where do we go from here now? Obviously, the game versus Man City coming up. Is this an opportunity for Lampard to, win back some good fortune, or, is this game even going to come? Joe, I'm going to ask you, man. If you can hear me.
Yeah, the City game.
Yeah, the City game.
Part of me just wants this Chelsea team to be put in like cotton wool for like 2 weeks. Like send them off. Like Dubai seems relatively safe right now. Put them on like a beach in Dubai for 2 weeks. Let them chill out. Then another part of me thinks that it could be a pivotal game in terms of if we go to the game and actually somehow manage to get a result there, that all of the sort of negativity, doubts and questions that there have been over the past few weeks, that takes a sharp turn. I think Daniel alluded to that earlier, that, a good run of form here kind of turns the debate sort of onto the other side here. So I'm not sure if things are going to go ahead. I saw the other game we had. Was it Morecambe? Are we playing them soon?
Yeah.
I'm kind of lost with the fixtures. But
Morecambe and Fulham.
Yeah, I think Morecambe posted something, but they've had tons of COVID cases, so that looks like that's probably going to be postponed. So it's going to be tricky. But yeah, I mean, unsure if it's going to go ahead, but I think potentially it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Let's say it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if this Chelsea side got two weeks off, whatever, to have a bit of R&R, because I think we want to push on second half of the season, and I think trying to maybe force the squad to sort of re-energise a little bit and actually recuperate would not be the worst thing in the world. Obviously, then it creates fixture congestion later in the season, but you'd hope by then that some of the players we've got injured at the moment come back and gives us a little bit more variety in terms of squad selection.
Joe, do you feel like some of the players we have missed out on have made a massive difference, in regards to like the recent form, or do you feel like it's a bit of both?
I think it is a little bit of both. I mean, I think I can't remember which podcast I was on, but earlier in the season, someone asked me who would have been the most important player, and I kind of was sort of alluding to Hakim Ziyech being the guy that we probably would miss most, because I think at the moment, we've spoken a lot about the squad's age so far on the stream. He is one of the few players that is in their peak, has experience, has won titles, has actually done stuff in European competition. He's like a peak age player. And I think sometimes you kind of, yes, we have got players that got experience, but they're still incredibly young. And I think we do miss, it's certainly in the final third, those sorts of areas, we miss Ziyech's kind of leadership, his sort of intelligence and ability. I keep thinking back to that Burnley game where he was basically, effectively just penciled in as a right winger, but he was playing everywhere on the pitch. And I think sometimes you need someone who has that level of experience and ability to kind of trigger the other players into their movement patterns. So when Ziyech kind of switches centrally, someone moves to the right. When he was coming across to the left-hand side, people were switching places. You almost need someone to take the ownership, to take the kind of direction and be the guy that's sort of going to kick things off. And I think we lack that a little bit when we have some of the younger guys there. They tend to be a little bit more static when he's not playing. I think he's been a big miss. And I think actually just both the injuries to the fullbacks, I don't think either James or Chilwell are particularly 100% at the moment. I didn't probably appreciate until recently just how much we need both of them to be at absolutely like 95% and above to have this style of play and have it work properly. And then probably the last one has just been Kante. I think he started off the season probably, I would say, playing some of the best football he has for Chelsea. I think he was exceptional. Then when he pushed into right central midfield, and I think the work, I know we've spoken about this before, Nini, in terms of I've kind of felt that you get the best out of him by reducing some of that workload, playing him as a DM, so he doesn't have to do as much running. I think when he switched to sort of the right central midfield role, the amount of covering he's had to do for certain players, the DM spot, playing with Jorginho, I think he has to do a lot more running, covering both fullback positions, trying to break into the area. I think it's asking too much of him. Same with Mason Mount. I think that has been problematic, but probably Ziyech has been the big miss. And then I would say, certainly both fullbacks being not quite sort of at the capacity we saw earlier in the season. And then obviously it doesn't help when you're, Kai Havertz is sort of post-COVID form. I felt against Burnley that he was just starting to come into a little bit of form, we were starting to see some of that class and quality in midfield. I think he's been a miss just in terms of his creativity, his size as well, his presence, his ability to actually play through the middle. So I mean, there have been some big misses, and again, it's difficult to sort of predict in terms of where the side would be if these players had remained fit. As I said, I mean, I'm not someone who is going to sort of say that I think some of the training practices have probably led to some of the players having a lot more fatigue at the moment than potentially they should have. There should have been more rotation, or with hindsight, etc. But it's sort of why I'm alluding to the fact that I would quite like this too. Potentially this sort of break coming up in terms of if the City game gets postponed, and Morecambe probably looks like it will be postponed, because I think it gives the team a little bit of time to actually re-energise itself. Because I think at the moment, I don't want to start talking about the Arsenal game in too much detail, but it was very evident after the first 10-15 minutes that the energy levels just weren't there. Just rest and recuperate, and hopefully, as I say, the second half of the season, you should hopefully have those key players come back in, be at sort of a good level of condition, good level of fitness, and then we can potentially up the intensity. If we don't play with any intensity, if we don't play with that press, if we don't play at the tempo that Lampard wants to, which again I think is sometimes a little bit difficult given the workload that the players have had. But if we can't get to sort of the balance of pressing intensity and sort of managing the workload, it's going to be sort of a tricky second half of the season, I think.
Okay, I hear that. So would you say, like, in your opinion, maybe like fatigue issues have been one of the main reasons behind the downfall? You mentioned obviously the fullbacks, Reece and Ben, not being, super consistent with it. Of course, Ziyech, not having him in the team. For me, it's the same equivalent of when City don't have their, De Bruyne's, and teams don't have their best players like that. As I always say all the time, and this is what I mean by like with the tactics, obviously, I feel like I kind of get what we're trying to do here. I get how we're trying to play with that intensity, that speed. We're not trying to just play wide. We're trying to use the flanks to create those overloads, to stretch the play, to, get Werner to be free, that free man. Because last season, Werner was signed because we create those opportunities and then we wouldn't finish them. Now, of course...
Sorry, guys, I've got to go, but thanks for having me, man. I've just got to rush off. Thank you, though.
Cool. But as I was saying, we signed Werner, so he could be that guy that was going to get on the end of these things, bury them, finish the goals, and, to do that, we have to create those openings for him. And that was why Ziyech and Kai were signed. Ziyech is the guy where people start running when he's on the ball. And this is what I mean by the team game. When Ziyech isn't in the team, Cover's not going to make players run. Kante's not going to make players run. Jorginho's not going to make players run because they don't have the quality to find him that Ziyech can do. It's the same thing with Kai. And, it was before that injury, I felt like I was starting to see what was happening between Kai and Ziyech, because I think it was that Burnley game where maybe it was the best game of the season in terms of like a complete football, easy performance that we haven't seen for a while, watching our team, and just seeing that interchange between Ziyech and Kai,
I think that's the style that Lampard's going for. When people talk about, what is the end goal? That those sort of moments leading up to the Burnley performance to me, that's sort of what Lampard is aiming for. Very fluid midfield, very fluid attack. Width provided by fullbacks, but the ability to attack centrally because you've got so much rotations. I remember Mason Mount was finding some great passes from deep into central areas. That for me is the style we're going for. This said, the concern that I have is that I think at the moment we don't quite have the players when people are dropping out to replicate that. When I think a little bit earlier when I was alluding to this sort of plan B, maybe plan B is a slightly wrong word, but there's sort of like a structure in place when the top guys are out. How do we kind of best that? And I think that the point you're making earlier, Nearly, is great in that if Liverpool dropped 3 or 4 of their top players out the side, they're not the same unit. And I think you could sort of see that with what Lampard sort of produced over the past couple of weeks, certainly the Arsenal performance and others, where we haven't had everyone at the races, we haven't had all the top players there. But where you're Klopp and where you're all these other managers, you've got more of kind of a CV to fall back upon in terms of, we can produce this because look what we did 2-3 seasons ago. Don't think Lampard quite has that, obviously because he's a new manager. He doesn't have that credit in the bank. So people will kind of ask questions because they haven't seen him replicate it with sort of the stars out of the side.
Yeah, and I think that's like the shame because, of course, like with football or anything, if you're going to look for constant, like definitive, like facts in front of your face, then you're never going to really, like, get the full picture because I think we've all watched football for years. I think after a while you can build patterns, understand what this means when this happens, when that happens, this means this and that and X, Y, Z. And, that's just kind of how things work. So, for me, You know, we haven't even seen what Lampard's best system is consistently, because the new signings haven't played, I think, more than 10 games together yet. You know, when Klopp and Pep were taking over their teams, I don't remember them having no Salah for the first, month and a bit out of the season. I didn't remember those types of conditions happening against them. And obviously, the reason why patience for me is key is because this will bring results, I feel. I mean, think about like there's people constantly talking about plan Bs, and there's no plan B. What do you do? For me, I think the players are the plan B. For example, let's say you're playing that 4-3-3, Ziyech is on the right-hand side. In game, he moves in field now. You now got Ziyech in the middle. Kai's now playing down the right-hand side channel. They've swapped positions. Ziyech brings something new. He brings more incision with his passing between the lines. He might try a spectacular 35-yard shot, like what he does. We've seen that time and time again. And then the sick thing is, as the game continues on, you now see Ziyech move back to the right. He's putting those balls in the box. Why? Because now Kai Havertz is entering the space with the late arrivals. 6'3" Kai in the air. He's getting inside the box because that's why we sign him. Because he scores goals, because he plays in the box, he moves into the box. And this is what I mean. We haven't even seen these things consistently to even have this fear just yet that nothing's going to happen. It would be different if Kai and Ziyech were out for 10 months. Boom, we can't have them this season. And so many real strong things were happening right now. But knowing that all these guys are, I think, basically back right now that we've got a bit of time before the City game and the Morecambe games, I feel like the positivity for me is coming back.
See, the thing is, Nini, what you said about Havertz there, that's all well and good. But when you're seeing heat maps after games and seeing Havertz is most of the time playing in positions behind Kante, that's a concern. And that's up to the manager. That's not Kai Havertz choosing to play so deep. That's on the manager. And you have to put that on the manager. You can't put that on Kai.
Joe, how would you answer that?
I think if you're an attacking player and you're not getting the ball, then the natural answer is that you come deeper looking for possession. It's something that we've seen for a number of years from not just Chelsea players, but if you're an attacking central midfielder, the natural thing for you to do if you're not receiving the ball or people aren't playing you in pockets of space is to come deep and influence the play. Now that's something that wouldn't necessarily be by instruction. I would do that certainly as a central midfielder who's played before. I would come looking for the ball if the ball wasn't coming to me. So I'm not entirely sure that is something that is instructed by Lampard. I'm certain almost in most cases that he would want him to stay high. He would want him to almost be sort of a quasi kind of number 10, sort of sit in those pockets, try and get beyond or sit the other side of the holding player.
Isn't it a problem that he's having to do that so often? Fair if he has to do it here and then, but the fact he's doing it so often to get the ball, isn't that a concern?
No, I mean, I said sort of early in the stream that the thing that I have most reservations about is that when things aren't working and when the team isn't 100%, I don't think at the moment they've had the time to create these sort of patterns of play and these kind of set ways of progressing the ball on the pitch, because I just don't think the time has been there in terms of coaching. So for certainly the past couple of games, or even when Havertz was having a bit of a dip in form, and certainly when he's more kind of hunting possession, I think you'll see that actually it really is just kind of sort of symptomatic of the entire team, in that they don't really have the, I would call it muscle memory, really sort of the kind of embedded or sort of enmeshed sort of kind of tactical, you can almost say, instruction from the coaching staff. And I think the point I said was that, you either take that as a stick to beat with, a stick to beat Lampard with, or you accept it as something that is part and parcel of this particular season. So, I mean, you could say that Lampard could instruct him to just stand up the pitch, but then in which case you've got a £75 million player who's just standing in a 10 yards of space, not receiving the ball. And it's not something necessary that I think, when we have Kante maybe at DM, and certainly when Mount was probably playing a little bit deeper, Mount certainly has the ability to play those passes. But I just think that, the way that the team is playing at the moment, certainly that midfield composition doesn't have much balance, doesn't have much real ability to play sort of through the lines, to play vertically in terms of passes. So it's a bit tricky to ask a player to just sort of maintain the position that you want him to stand in, when I suppose deep within him he'll want to try and come deep and try and influence the play. I mean, the thing is as well, I keep going back to the Burnley game because I think that's the stand-up game that we've probably had this season in terms of performance. Havertz came deep plenty in that game, but then he had players to play in. He had Ziyech coming in pockets, he had Mount progressing forward, he had Reece James overlapping, he had the striker dropping in. The movement around him allowed him to come deep and actually be influential. Whereas at the moment, I think when he comes deep, he turns and then there's no movement ahead of him. There's no one coming in from wide spaces. There's no one trying to drop into the number 10 hole. The striker is mostly looking for kind of longer passes rather than maybe trying to come in and take the ball to feet. So I just think it's a little bit altered, and I do agree with Nini to some extent that it is probably fairly linked to the personnel that we've had. But again, my concern at the moment is just I think that the way that we have to be completely at the races to play well is concerning, that we do have to be 100%, have all of the best players playing to look like a team that sort of can finish in the top 3-4 positions.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's one of the things that time will tell as the season goes on. But like for me, it all comes down to the fact that there hasn't been enough time to condition these things properly. I mean, what we were talking about with that Burnley game. I mean, how many Burnley games have we had since then? We haven't even had those right conditions. And I do feel like it's annoying. It is, because it means that more patience is needed. But now that these guys are basically back, I feel like it's not like we have to wait too long for the fortunes to turn around. And I guess my whole perspective from this whole debate with everyone is that I'm not here to talk about like who's right or wrong. I just want to try and just call out some of the truth behind the criticism, because I feel like not every criticism lands and isn't necessary. And I do feel like there's so much unnecessary criticism that just keeps fueling all this non-stop negativity, where we are becoming a bit of a joke fan base online, to be honest. I remember we used to laugh at other fan bases for having their meltdowns, and now we're just another club that does the same type of thing.
But to be fair, Nini, I think that definitely goes both ways, because you have been preaching about the positivity so much. No, the negativity so much, sorry. But the positivity is when you have a criticism and someone saying you're not a real fan, that doesn't help. It doesn't help at all. And we are right to have these criticisms. Like, you can see it on the pitch, and every Chelsea fan has a right to be fuming after that Arsenal game. And no one should be defending Lampard for that game specifically. Yeah. So if anyone does,
no one did. Lampard didn't defend himself. The player didn't defend himself.
No, but the thing is, the things we were seeing was I remember some things I said after the Arsenal game. And it was just trust the process. You're allowed to voice criticism. It's not a crime. You're allowed to do it, and I think that's the problem. It's just that people just can't respect each other's opinion. I don't think it's people are too negative, people are too positive. I just think people just don't respect each other enough.
But where does that come from, though? Why don't they? Because this is what I've been trying to think about. Why does this unnecessary criticism, hate come when we're talking about something that's just entertainment? Where, you know what I mean? We all got our own lives outside of here. I'm sure people in the chat got some successful careers themselves, or got some nice lives for themselves. And I just why is it when we all come together over our passion, it is this non-stop negativity for no reason? And I think both sides play their part in not really being as objective as they like to think with each other, to be honest, because I think that he doesn't really see it too much, to be honest.
No, but I think it all started, when Matty said it started from Sarri, I think it started from Conte for when he was fired.
Yeah, I think
and
so
then
too.
That's where the root of the problem started.
But do you think maybe we're even seeing this whole thing weird with the whole online fan base? I mean, there's millions of Chelsea fans. It's not like we see millions of new accounts every day when we're on Twitter. We see the same stuff all the time. So is this a case of us overblowing something out of context that's a vocal minority?
I really don't know. I think that Arsenal game really hit us hard.
Yeah.
I think it hit every Chelsea fan really hard, and some people had an overreaction to it. Some undersold it a little bit, but I think that Arsenal game was really the turning point, to be honest.
Yeah, man. But I think you guys, just to quickly just close off this section right now, we're going to answer the super chats very quickly. And starting with the first one, I'll let you answer this, Daniel. This is from... Where is it? From ITS Merchant. Haven't beat anyone in the top 10. Give your quick answer to that.
We beat West Ham.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
We beat West Ham on just before Christmas. Does he mean generally in the big games, right? I assume that's what he's getting.
Haven't beaten anyone on top 10. In top 10.
Okay, well we have.
Yeah, I think it's West Ham are the only ones. I think
okay,
that's why.
So I think thank you, I test. We move on.
Tottenham in the cup.
Yeah, I remember them too. Billy Royston, Lampard in. It ain't his fault. We missed chances. Yeah, I do think this is what I mean. We're trying to coach a style of football where the players are the ones that have to make the difference. We've seen managers like your Contes and Sarris where they try and coach everything. That has its limitations, and we saw like under Conte, for example, we had some great attacking talent, and how one-dimensional did our attack look constantly all the time under Sarri, under Conte as well. So I do think Lampard's the first coach I've seen where players do actually get into really good opportunities to score, and our players aren't scoring them right now. So anyway, moving on to PZ Drift. Who would start next to Mount, Kante at CDM? Younes, I'll let you answer that.
Who would start next to?
Mount with Kante, Mount and Kante. Who starts at CDM?
At the moment, I really would give Havertz a run. He's back, he's fit, he's rested. Like, let's see what he can do. I'd give it to Havertz.
Yeah, okay, cool. Moving on to Sammy. Smash the like button, people. It's about to be heat. Thank you, man. Felix, I'm fine with crossing, but it has to be a variety of crosses, cutbacks, and build up. Play through the middle. Why don't we do that? That's on Frank. Joe, I'll let you answer that. Do you feel like Felix is right by saying that crossing's okay, but switch up the crosses, let's force through the middle? Why do you think that we aren't seeing that?
I mean, crosses are fine when you've got Reece James. I think Chilwell's decent. Hudson, the way he plays. I mean, we have good crosses of the ball, so it's a little bit kind of stupid and naive to say, oh, we shouldn't cross it because crossing is some sort of archaic tactic. But I think importantly, you play through the middle when you have midfielders who can actually do that. And certainly when you have, I think Kante's that particularly great at picking up those passes. Jorginho certainly isn't, and nor is Real Kovacic. Is more of a kind of ball carrier through midfield. Yeah. So it's tricky to say why don't we play for the middle when you have three midfielders who don't particularly do it. So I think that's a little bit personnel. It is for me again. I've said there is some sort of tactical stuff on Lampard in terms of maybe not being able to, or maybe not. That's probably the wrong way of putting it. Maybe not having the time at the moment to really implement that style of coaching. But I don't think really when you look at the bulk of our central midfielders that they have that sort of quality to consistently play for the middle, and it's probably why Havertz has been kind of tried to, not, I wouldn't say pigeonhole him into a central midfield role, but certainly bring him into central midfield because he can find those passes and he can also carry the ball as well. But short answer,
too.
But yeah.
I'd have to say I agree with you because we've got great crosses, we've got so many great ones. I do feel like we do see variety. It's not like this one standard cross we constantly see. I think we end up being in the scenarios where we end up playing those lazy types of crosses, which you were describing earlier, when it comes to that muscle memory, because that's what, great teams are really built on. A lot of times you're not going to be analysing to see where your teammate is. You're working on the training ground because it's supposed to be, autonomous. It's supposed to be just like that. Everyone is like completely in sync. That's what the very, very best teams do. And I think at times when the quality isn't there, as we've mentioned, it's been the midfield. When you're using guys from last season that put us in a certain position, contributed for me personally behind the 54 goals we conceded. I mean, what do you expect when they know? I think we should all know by now that they just will never play forward quickly or do anything one touch. So that was his question. Moving on to Ken Berry. New signings haven't even played 10 games together. I'm going to answer that. I agree, man. Mark, Con, do you regret? I guess it's for you, Con. Do you regret posting that Tuchel picture right in the middle of all the toxicity surrounding Chelsea and Lampard on the TL? This is not a dig, by the way.
A little, yeah. I know I can have an opinion, but I also have to understand that I have like a little bit of influence. And at the time, it didn't help. I was just annoyed because what I saw on the pitch. And I think the deeper meaning to that is Pulisic was also in that picture. And I was just getting annoyed to see Pulisic start on the right. So I posted a picture of a manager who Pulisic played under very well. So that was the point of the picture. But yeah, thinking about it was a bit of a childish move.
Yeah, I mean, you owned up to it. I mean, come on, I've said my own stuff too. I think we all have, you all say stupid things. But yeah, I guess that is your answer. I mean, I think personally too, that was definitely like not the right time for that. Because I don't know, like when we're on socials and we have like big platforms, you kind of know what your responses are going to get, You can kind of like guess how your people are going to respond to it and what type of reaction you're going to get.
See, that's the thing. People who know me very well is like, sometimes I forget that like the influence that I just talk without thinking sometimes.
I mean,
And
I believe that.
yeah.
I believe that. I think we all do that too. So I think this is why sometimes when you're a big account, it can be harder because, you know, you kind of have to. You're forced to move a certain way because after a while, you know, you can't be tweeting just like how you're tweeting to your boys or your girls, you know. But obviously, moving on to the next question. Okay, Shady Nation, lies, stop it. Big up Rivals and Derby. I mean, yeah, I got paid for that. Cool. Wendell Waters, Lampard can't be judged fairly until Ziyech, Pulisic and Werner are all healthy or playing together. But I don't think there's currently a league title-winning striker in the team. We're lacking this. We need Haaland. So, Younes, I'm going to let you answer this, man. How do you feel about that question? Is Haaland the answer to just, you know, just taking our chances and getting the points?
I mean, flipping out. Haaland would be unbelievable. I think everyone in the chat would know that. But I honestly, I want to see a run of Timo Werner as a centre forward because I really believe that the moment he gets on the score sheet a couple of times, that confidence will start coming in.
Yeah.
And I'm waiting for that. I have full faith in Timo Werner. I really do. So now that, you know, hopefully players are back, Pulisic's back, and Ziyech is about to come back against City if we do play.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's give Werner that opportunity and just let him run with it a little bit. Even if we do see a couple of misses, just give him that consistency and let him get on the score sheet. Hopefully a couple of times that will raise his confidence, and we hopefully get to see the real Timo Werner up front. So yeah.
Okay, nice one, man. Moving on to Mo Welly. Lampard has picked up Chelsea in a precarious position with a transfer embargo. In this season, he's assembled stars, so he should be given time to mold them. I'll answer that. Mo, yeah, I definitely agree. Moving on to Shady Nation. So we can criticize Cover and not Mason. We can't come up with it if he's the players. Thank you, bro. Okay, now for the final questions, we've got a few more left. Harry, is the Man City Chelsea games... Okay, we spoke about that. So yeah, you got your answer, Harry. Simon Sheena, why pick loyalty to one person over the team? Roman's ruthless empire works. This is not a debate. Lampard will understand the sack. Don't worry, boys. He's a fan. Yeah, I'll let you answer that, Daniel. I can repeat that for you if you want.
So about sort of like basically just going back to what we've done for years and years and just like, well...
Yeah.
My whole argument is I don't think it is going to work as well as it used to. I feel that if you're talking about the idea that where I think that we were blessed with the fact we had an incredible team when Roman came in that assembled. I'm talking like from 2004 to maybe 2015 at a stretch, right? But I'm mainly talking about that great team that won two or three titles. Where you had world-class players. And I don't think we appreciate as Chelsea fans how amazing that team was, how ridiculous it was actually in the context of now. And I think that the idea that, you know, when those players, they had that amazing mentality and they were almost of a different generation, Lampard and JT and Didier, you know, they grew up with sort of cleaning the boots of the first team players, and there was a little bit more sort of personal responsibility in a sense. Young players now, from at least what, you know, I don't know any young players personally who've gone into academies, but everything we read is there's so much more, the way players in academies now are brought up, like the players that are now in our first team, is so different to the way Frank Lampard and JT came up in terms of everything so structured. They're used to tactics. There is so much more in depth at this point that I think you could almost, not only due to the world-class quality of Lampard, JT, Didier and all those players, that you could shift out a manager and they could almost be leaders on the pitch themselves. We had so many leaders in that team to sort out chaotic seasons that they were probably just used to the chaos at that point that, well, we're still here. We'll still go out and win trophies because we're brilliant players. We've got that winning mentality in us. With the current first team, we were just speaking about earlier in the stream about this team not having those players within it, not having barely any of those players that you can rely on to step up when we used to have Edin. That was the one player. I don't think these group of players with sort of the generation difference between Lampard's generation and this generation can deal with that chaos as well. To just pick it up and go, we're going to change things and suddenly we'll end up winning a trophy at the end of the year. I don't think the instability is going to help us as much as it used to. I think Because if that was the case, we wouldn't have won the league with Sarri. You know, the moment we sacked Conte, we would have gone on and won the league title with Sarri the next year. And then when Sarri left, we would have been in a title challenge. I know that's a simplistic way of answering that question, but I think that we need to get away from that as like the solution, because there's no way Roman, when he bought the club, wanted to turn us into a club that only had managers for 2 years. I just cannot believe that's what his mentality was. Everything we've heard about Roman, and I think a lot of people try and second guess Roman and will tell you what he's thinking when a lot of us don't know what really he's thinking. You can only go by his actions. I think he wants to, at least for years, it's been rumoured that he wants to build sort of more of a dynasty, you know, a club that has a longer term philosophy, bringing in the academy, playing a nice style of football. Unfortunately, if you want us to play a lovely style of football, you need to have a bit more patience about that. That's if you're only going to allow managers under 18 months to do that, I think you're going to be left with what we've had recently, which is more reactive football, counter-attacking football, players and managers having to pick the scraps up of other managers' signings, and then we have to let those signings go because they're not what the new manager wants. And I think that at some point, as I say, in 5 years' time, are we going to be sat here once again debating the same topic and wondering why aren't Chelsea at the top of the table, and should we sack whoever that manager is in 5 years' time? You know, that's my question. Can we just at least see something through as a club and see how it works before blowing up? If Lampard is outside the top four and he finishes the season 8th in the league, it's not the same situation. If Lampard finishes inside the top four once again, but we don't challenge for the league, are you going to sack him then? You know, I think that there needs to be also that understanding. If we don't win the league this season or don't seriously challenge for it, but we still get in the Champions League, are the club going to give him the boot?
Yeah, man, I definitely agree. And I think that's definitely one thing that I'm definitely going to be thinking about when it comes to just making content over these next few days. But to finish with the last few questions, Felix and Shady again, stop interrupting Martin Younes, let them finish. You guys on stream, I apologize, 100% apologize. I'm definitely going to get better at how I live stream, present, talk. You know, it's a very bad habit. I apologize to everyone for doing that. I hate doing it myself. Monster comes out. Yeah. I'm sorry, you guys, but I'll be better next time. And to end with the final two, Jesus, this is an unprecedented season that has challenged every manager. No team is consistent or great this season. This could affect. Why can't this affect Lampard too? I'll let anyone take that. Younes, what are you feeling about that?
I mean, that has been one advantage, is that the fact many teams have kind of gone up and down. At the same time, there has been teams where it seemed inconsistent, and now there seems to be a little bit of progress. And I'm hoping, after the Man City game, or the Man City game onwards, we begin to have that seep in for us. But it's definitely been, when you look at Liverpool, who are top, and I think they've collected 32 points out of 45, and they're top of the league. So the circumstances everyone's in has definitely played a factor for sure. But we hope things get better for us, because the reality is, for us, the last 5 games we've collected 4 points, so it needs to improve.
Okay, and for the final question, this goes to Ken Berry. The best teams have chemistry on top of tactics. Joe, I think that falls nicely with lots of things you've been saying, basically. What's your thoughts on Ken's question before you wrap the stream up?
Yeah, I think just final thing, really. I think one of the interesting things, certainly from this season, is that it feels like whenever we play, I don't know, it could just be me just sort of misremembering things, but it almost feels like we have completely new combinations every time we play at the moment. And it's incredibly, incredibly difficult to build up any sense of chemistry. And in terms of chemistry, we're sort of talking about, when to make runs, when, you anticipate that another player is going to play a through ball, where to move if someone's carrying the ball, all these sorts of things that don't quite sit in tactics. They come from playing sort of regularly with players. It's kind of the dovetailing in why I think Michael Ballack and Lampard, when they figured out that midfield combination, why it was so potent, because the chemistry was there. They understood when Lampard was going, Ballack would move, Lampard would drop. They could figure things out. And it just seems to be, certainly at the moment, that we have, it's either like a new full-back and winger pairing, it's a new DM and centre-back pairing, it's 2 new central midfielders. There's no real sort of consistency in selection. I think a lot of that is down to injuries. A lot of it is down to the schedule that we have at the moment. But I think the thing to look for certainly is that there is some sort of semblance of stability being built with the Silva and Zuma centre-back pairing and Mendy. That sort of triangle seems to be kind of sitting quite neatly. We need to get the fullbacks, as I said earlier, get them back fit, because I think that's a big part of the defensive stability. And then it comes again into a question of having, for me, as an ex-defensive midfielder, having a consistent DM in front of the back four is massive, because the way that Jorginho protects the back four is completely different to Kante. That completely impacts how your entire defensive shape, how far your fullbacks can press forward, how confident your centre-backs are in defending certain areas, where they play the ball, where the person's going to receive the pass. There's so much that comes in from these very, very small details. But there are certainly, I'm a big person in terms of the spine of the team, and that for me is where we need to get some consistency. At the moment, again, this is me just sort of completely making this up. I doubt that we have had the spine of the team. So let's say Mendy, Silva, Zuma, Kante at DM, and for argument's sake, let's say Giroud up front. That spine of the team probably hasn't started maybe 10, 15 games this season. From memory, again, that could be completely wrong, but it doesn't feel that is the case. So I'd start by trying to get some consistency in the spine of the team, and then putting your jigsaw pieces around them, trying to get consistency between winger and fullback, and then trying to figure out the best central midfield pairing. Because I don't think we're going to be able to play centrally until we figure out the central midfield pairing, and equally until we kind of get consistency between who is playing wide and who is playing fullback. That ability to attack in the final third, who goes wide, who comes in. No, it's not going to happen for a while. So yeah, there's certainly a massive issue for me in terms of the consistency. But I said a lot of that isn't down to Lampard. It's injuries, it's form, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, there needs to be something that we need to work on for the rest of the season.
Would you feel like we could accelerate things if we use things like a different formation? Let's say we use 4-2-3-1, 4-2-2-2. Do you think that could bring something quicker? Or do you think maybe different formations could suit some of the other players in the squads? Or does none of it make a difference?
I think, I mean, I've been a little bit surprised that certainly during the kind of rough patch that we haven't gone to a back three. Not because I think it's the world's greatest formation. I just think the kind of the base and the stability that it offers. The three centre backs for me, having kind of more natural wing backs and having a bit more of a compact midfield. When you're going through rough moments, I think certainly having a little bit more stability at the back kind of works. I think, I am someone who does think that we played quite well in that position. Does also offer you the opportunity to potentially play Tammy and Giroud at times as a two up front. Werner off of Giroud, actually get Werner in a position that he's more comfortable in, playing as either a secondary striker or with a big man, which we saw in Germany. So maybe a three at the back is something I was potentially maybe I wouldn't say expecting to see, but I kind of had a little bit of an inkling that maybe we would transition to that. But in terms of actual formations, I mean 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3. I mean, they're very much the same. As soon as you actually get into the flow of the game, if you have a midfield pivot, central midfielder pushes up, it becomes a midfield three straight away. So I'm not someone who's massively hung up on details, but the three at the back would be something that I would have been at least interested to see, just for solidity, and I think maybe just taking some of the sting and not requiring us to play with that full press, complete energy that we've had in the 4-3 system that Lampard's tried to play.
I think that's actually a pretty valid point. I wasn't even thinking about a three at the back, to be honest. But I guess what you're saying is when you've got a congested month like this, you kind of need to know how to balance the stamina levels. I think
exactly.
The Leeds game, I think all of us can agree. We all saw the stats afterwards, but I think some of us felt too, okay, do we have to run this hard against Leeds when we have a game in the next few days? I mean, I think we've all played football before. I remember when I was at school once, for some crazy reason, we had 3 school games in 1 week. 3 in 1 week. I'm like in year 6. I played all 3 games up front. Imagine my stamina levels at the end of the week, So you exemplify that to the professional game, guys who are, conditioned to be that top athletes all the time. You can imagine that, fitness plays an even bigger part behind good performances. But I do want to say now, you guys, this stream has gone on for a very long time. I feel like there's going to be that is a massive understatement, but I do feel like there's going to be even more discussions. I think maybe just even some smaller ones, more focused ones on certain ideas, and in the future I do want to continue with more long formatted streams like this. And to the viewers too, I do want to say that there's a little bit of issues behind the stream. I'm going to practice on just, making the shows seamless, and, I want to feel like all the guests really were able to say everything they wanted to do. But sometimes it's hard, like controlling a chat, controlling this, and then dictating a conversation as well. So I do want to say a massive thank you to everyone that came on, and as you guys can see on screen, they're the details. Make sure you follow them on Twitter. Make sure you follow them on YouTube as well. I know that Younes has got some videos ready for you guys straight away, so head over straight to his channel when you're done. And you guys, this was the Frank Lampard debate. In the comments, give your thoughts and opinions. What side do you fall on, or do you feel like we shouldn't even be talking about sides in the first place? I'm Younes FC. This is Blue Lines TV. Catch you guys later with